We're live, Jeff. You have way too much high-tech equipment in your studio. Is that your studio or is that your recording studio?
Yeah,
Use
I
your
wish I had a recording studio. No, I'm just in the middle of my studio, just middle of my painting studio right here.
That is so
It's
great.
just there's a lot more
Well,
to it, but
I've been looking forward to talking to you about this because you have, aside from your amazing painting career, you have this amazing podcast interviews going on that now it's just surpassed 100 interviews, which is amazing.
yeah, I
100
know, I
conver
can't even believe it.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to um, I'm excited to have you today and get you undraped live, which is cool.
Nice. It's my turn to get undraped.
Yeah, it's your turn. And for those of you who don't know Jeff's work, we're going to show you. Can I show you some of your work real quick before we
Oh
start?
yeah, okay,
I just
sure.
want to put you a few images.
Just I
Just
prefer to be the host, so I don't have to look at my own work.
I know. Well, now you're going to have to endure this. So I want to just go through a few images before we we go on. Let's see where to go. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait.
Yeah, I see my painting.
Do you see it?
Yeah,
Okay, good, good,
it's a
good.
demo.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful, this painting.
Thank
Your your
you.
your whole portrait series is so amazing. And so you do this from life. One of the things that I listened to your interviews, you really talked about painting from life as much as possible with your work.
Yeah. Well, that's what it used to be, but when COVID hit, I started using photography. So now I use it a lot more. I still work from life, but
Yeah,
it was for 14 years I didn't even touch a camera at all.
14
In
years.
14 years, yeah. In fact, when I bought or when I came back to using photography, I was shocked at how advanced the cameras were. That's how out of the loop I was.
Yeah, wow.
Um, but with
Well,
COVID, I just didn't have an option.
right.
People wouldn't sit for me without a mask on, so I started having to
Well,
just use
that's
photography. And then I realized, man, I'm 50 years old and I'm so much more productive with photography. It's time to just, you know, go ahead and make the shift into photography. So I'm using it more now, but I'm not exclusively. I still work from life,
yeah. Well, I imagine with
but
your
everything
experience,
you're showing is from life.
yes. I remember this
Yeah.
painting at the Portrait Society. You had that as one of the finalists, I believe. If you didn't win something,
Yeah. I got second place. It got
right.
second place that year.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that and that's the thing. You've been with the Portrait Society, and you're a finalist almost every year in one way or another. And in fact, the first time I met you, Jeff, was at the Portrait Society, and they had us on stage together. And do you remember that?
That was the first time we met.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. That was a blast. That was a
Yeah,
blast. Yeah. We need to do that again.
I would love
Aren't you in
to.
charge over there? You can make this happen.
I'm not in charge. I can
Aren't you one of the big shots?
I can certainly ask if they will put us to.
No, that
But
was fun. Yeah, you were fun to paint with on stage.
that was great. I remember you had like a little 11 by 14, tiny little canvas for such a big guy, and I was doing a 20
I
by
know.
24, cracking me up.
Yeah, I think I made some joke about overcompensating or something that year.
Yeah, I was the one over.
Yes. Right.
Oh, but I want to show some of your paintings real quick to give people a sense of these paintings from life. They're so full of color, and we'll talk more about them. But I just wanted to get a sense of what you do. Some of these portraits here, family portraits, are absolutely phenomenal. And
That's some of my funnest work. I like doing family portraits.
yeah, I mean, officially, family portraits never look like this, and you've made it into something
Yeah.
contemporary, like Wayne Thiebaud. At the same time, there's a little Norman Rockwell thing going on here.
Wait
And
a minute.
I
Did I tell you that?
what?
You
What?
literally just nailed the two people I was looking at. You're the first person in history to nail it on the head.
Really?
I swear to you, I was looking at Wayne Thiebaud, and I don't know that I was looking at Norman Rockwell, but it's obvious I was influenced by him. But I was looking at Wayne Thiebaud, and no one picks that up. You're the first one to pick that up.
Oh, the graphic depiction
Yeah,
of the is
I
for
love
sure.
that about his work. Love
Yeah,
that.
but these are such fun family portraits. And then
Thank you.
quickly I'm going to show something else, because I just want people who are looking at your work to see these before I do anything else. These are
Oh,
blowing my
that
mind.
painting was a nightmare to paint.
How big
So
is
that was
that?
all done from life too. It's not that big. It's about 7 feet. So the figure in the foreground is life size, and then it gets obviously progressively smaller. I
It's
think
not
she's
that
life
big.
size.
That's nuts.
Yeah,
Everything
and
was
they were
done.
all done from life. Yeah. It was so hard. I don't know
Okay,
how the old masters did it, you
I'm
know?
going to ask you more questions about that. Obviously, was this done from life too?
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yep.
cool.
That too. Yeah. Well, that's an
Wow.
easy one from life.
Yeah, right. These models. Anyway, I have
Yeah,
tons of.
that poor kid even sat there. And this one, when I painted this one, my daughter is the one on the left.
Yeah.
And man, she was miserable. She was 7 at the time. And the whole time she's like, Dad, this is awful. And she's not holding still at all. I was almost in tears. I'm like, please just hold a little more still.
My
And
God.
one of my students, I'll never forget it. One of my students came walking in and says, "Why don't you just take a picture?" And I almost decked him. I'm like, you think I don't know what a camera is? Obviously I know that's an option. I'm not an idiot. I made a choice here and I'm sticking with it.
Oh my
And
God.
it's funny
Did
now. At the time, I was just like, "God, I can't believe you just asked me that. You
you
know?
did you have all three of them posing at the same time?
No, no. So what I did was, I would paint it not in so much in sections, but I just work with their schedules. So I would paint the model for Jesus when he was available, and then when he wasn't available, I'd have a mannequin with his clothing on, and I'd have the
Wow.
girls just stand next to the mannequin, and I'd do one girl at a time. And then with
Wow.
the plants, I went out to a tropical plant place and just bought all these plants and filled my studio with them and just sort of layered them to try and make it feel like, it was actually in the woods.
That's amazing. Really.
Oh,
Man,
thanks. Thanks,
that's
man. I got to
listen.
tell you, Quang, that you're asking me questions and saying it's amazing is like a huge compliment. I already told you when I interviewed you, but you are seriously one of my idols, man. So I appreciate you
Oh,
saying that.
thank you so much. These paintings are amazing. They're blowing my
Thank
mind.
you.
Well, not only the scope of work, but how beautifully they're done. And like this one, the browns and the tones. And if you painted this, how did you do this?
I mean, I just had to improvise a lot on this one. And there's a lot of things I would do different today, to be honest. It's a pretty old painting, but
Yeah.
um it was an interesting story behind this one is the teenagers were friends of mine, or their
Mm.
parents were friends of mine. And the father, when he saw the painting, he was just sick. He couldn't even look at it
Why?
for obvious because his daughter's dead, and
Oh,
she's in the painting. So that's his daughter and son. And so I remember he kicked his wife. His wife kept saying, "Tell him it's good. Tell him it's good," under her breath. And he's like, "I can't. I just can't. I just can't look at it. I can't look."
that's
It's pretty funny. Yeah.
that's
So
wow. Well, there are so many epic things. We're gonna talk about all this. I just wanted to show, and I wanted to show them this painting, and this one. This one is mind blowing to me. I absolutely love this so much. How big is this?
that one's 8 feet by 6 feet.
What?
That, yeah, it's huge. And it's 150 or so objects in it. And what I did was I built a
What?
wall. Yeah, I built a wall, or I built a box out of 2x4s and layered it 3 layers deep with chicken wire and just started stacking objects in the back layer and then the middle layer and then the front layer just to create
Wow.
more depth so it didn't feel too surface. And
So
it took
what
me
was
6 months. 6 months. What's that?
6 months? What's the story behind it?
Yeah. So
I
this painting nearly made me sick. Like, I mean, literally, I painted this because of the 2008 recession, and I was invited to a show called Hard Times, and Stephen Assail was in the show. David Casson was in the show. A whole bunch of artists that I respect were in the show, and I wanted to really impress, but I did this because it's a painting that's me venting about what I perceive to be the materialism in the world that made the market crash. I mean, everyone was down on the banks. And
yeah.
and I remember at the time thinking, you know, I went to a bank to buy a house and they told me that I could buy, if I remember right, they told, I'm not going to say number. I'm just going to say random numbers. Okay. They told me I could buy $100,000 house and I only could afford, and I only felt comfortable spending $50,000. And they kept telling me, but you can get 100,000. We'll give you the money. And I kept saying, no, I don't want that much debt. I want a $50,000 house. A few years later, the market crashes and everyone's blaming the banks for giving them too much money. And all I could think was, you guys took too much money. You didn't have to take it. And now all my investments are crashing. Everything I own is worth crap.
Yeah.
And I was just, the whole time I was stressed out because I had just invested money that I'd made selling paintings and literally weeks before the market crash. So as I was painting this, that's what I was thinking about. I had everyone I know bring stuff. It's not my stuff. It's everyone I know, from a $10,000 coat to like that shawl in the front with the flowers. That's a really expensive shawl. But then I also had stuff like Guitar Hero guitars that are really worthless, just to show the scope of the things that we think we need in our lives. And, you know, and the thing is, I'm as guilty as anybody. I have so much crap I don't need. But at the time, I was just venting and just be like, why did everyone have to take so much money? Now everything, my house is worth nothing. My investments are worth nothing. Like, and I was freaking out because, you know, I had saved selling paintings, and I'm freaking out that I'm losing everything. So that's what this painting's about. And by the time I was done, I was so stressed out. I can't even tell you how stressed I was painting this painting, because every day I was thinking about that concept, and it wasn't mentally healthy. But now I look back at it, and it's one of my favorite paintings. Now I can look back at it without all that angst, you know, that I had at the time.
That was all worth it. All your stress is worth it for that one amazing masterpiece. Because I think
thanks, man.
Painting. What happened to it?
The Springfield Museum of Art acquired it, so it's in a museum in their permanent collection.
And it should be, right? So have you heard me talk about the concept of equalization?
No, what's that?
Equalization is a concept of painting where you're doing a painting without a focal point. So it's like a Jackson Pollock. And what you've done there is a Jackson Pollock with realism.
Right. Yeah. I know, and I worried about that when I was painting it, but it seemed to work okay.
Oh no, it works beautifully. That's one of my favorite paintings. Okay, so anyway, that's a quick glance at your work. So do you want the hard questions first or the easy ones?
Just good. Just let me have the hard ones. Just get it over with. Rip the Band-Aid off.
So what is art to you, Jeff?
Are you messing with me?
You should have a good answer to this with all the interviews you've had.
Yeah, well, just for the audience that doesn't know, I just interviewed you and asked you this question with Joe Paquette and Rose Franson. Yeah, that was awesome, by the way. What is art to me? Oh man, I wasn't prepared for this. Well, I mean, I kind of said it in our interview. I think art, I have a little more narrow definition of art. I think art celebrates greatness. I don't think it's just personal expression, because I think it's got to be more than that, or it's nothing. And because if everything is art, then nothing is art. You know, it's like that. What was that cartoon? It was one of my favorites. The Hero cartoon, the Disney animated Pixar one with all the superheroes, The Incredibles. And his mom's, they're driving, and the mom says to the boy, well, yeah, you're special, but everyone's special. And he's like, well, if everyone's special, then no one's special. And that's kind of how I feel with art is, you know, if it's too broad of a definition, then there is no art, right? And so to me, art is something that is elevated, something that shows the potential of humanity. But it has to have those three things that I had mentioned in our podcast. It has to have, in my opinion, it has to have good craftsmanship, good design, and a good idea. So anything that fits those to me is art. A great piece of furniture can be well crafted, well designed, and well thought out. You know, a painting, obviously, well crafted, well designed, and a great idea. And the idea doesn't have to be some political thing or anything like I did with the Consumed. It can be an idea about color. It can be an idea about emotion. It can be anything. But when I say a good idea, an idea that actually has an effect on the viewer, it's not empty and trivial. So that's art to me. Something that really celebrates human potential.
That's a good definition. I love that it's either everything's art or nothing is art in a sense. That's kind of an interesting way of looking at it too, you know, because then you can say, okay, then there's high art and there's, you know, so
well,
art.
that's not what I said exactly. I said, if everything's art, then nothing is art. It's not.
If everything's art.
If everything is art, then nothing is art. Right. Yeah. In my opinion.
Yeah. That reminds me of one of my favorite definition is by Joseph Campbell, you know, who wrote The Power of Myth. His definition of art was, it's a combination of the ability to perform, which is important. And then the other one was the idea or the concept or whatever the thing that brings you to do the work. Right. But then you have to have to perform as well. And one without the other is not art to him.
Yeah, and I would argue craftsmanship and design is the performance.
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah, that's the performance. Yeah,
yeah, right. The performance aspect of it is very important in the end because otherwise, why even bother doing it, right? The expression of it is better. So tell me a little bit about how you got started. Were you always a terrific drawer or
well, obviously not. No, I mean, I've always had an aptitude for it. I mean, as a little kid, I knew early on, just by comparing myself to people around me, that it came easy for me relative to my peers.
Right.
So I knew that I had an aptitude, but I never took classes because I was very insecure about it. I remember I would always tell my mother, who was actually quite supportive in this way, she'd be like, why don't you do more of it? If you really want to be an artist, why don't you do more? Why don't you take classes? Why don't you enter competitions? And I'd always say, well, yeah, I'm better than the kids at school, but yeah, I bet there's like other kids at the other school that would just trash me, you know? And so I always just had that feeling, and I just figured that it was, what's that?
What age was that you're talking about when your mom?
Oh, all through my childhood. But I mean, as a second grader is when I remember thinking I was going to be an artist. It was recess time. I've told this story before, but it was recess, and I was, for some reason, drawing at my desk instead of leaving the classroom, and a bunch of kids gather around. As you know how it is, how they do that. I'm sure you experienced that too on occasion as a kid, but all these kids gather around watching me draw and oohing and on. And one girl says to me, are you going to be an artist when you grow up? And I remember that day thinking, that's the first time I really thought about the question. And I remember deciding at that point, yeah, that is what I'm going to be. And from that point on, it never really wavered. I had other interests, a lot of other interests. And there were times I'm like, well, maybe I'll be a furniture maker, an engineer, or a veterinarian, or scientist, or an electrician, or something. But all these things I was interested in, but none of them stuck. They were just like fleeting ideas. But the art thing, that always stuck. But like I said, my mom would be like, well, if you want to be an artist, then why don't you do this or that? And I'm like, Mom, because I'm not very good. I'm kind of nervous about it. So I never really did much except one contest. You remember that turtle where you had to copy the turtle and send it in?
Behind the comic
book?
Yeah,
it was like that little, they'd mail it out to you back in the day. And there was a contest for kids, and you'd like copy the turtle and send it in. You'd color it in and everything. And I did that, and I won tickets to Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus for my whole family. And I was like, I think I was like 8 years old. I don't remember. And so that was the only contest I ever did. And I don't know why that didn't give me confidence, but so yeah, I got into high school, and I thought I would take classes then, and I had kind of a negative experience with my first art class in high school. So I dropped it like right away, and
Wow.
then just took multimedia stuff, movie, making commercials and photography and that sort of thing.
Interesting.
Um, and then never did it seriously until college.
What?
Um,
Really?
yeah, I was
Really?
mostly just out playing, riding bikes, playing sports. I didn't really take it seriously. In fact, when I went to college, my mother said, she said, "You're seriously going to do this? You don't even draw or paint." And I was like, "I know, but I want to, you know?" And so, yeah, so that it was, I don't know why when I really didn't do it very much that I really had it in my head that's what I would be, but I did.
So did you take, was that your degree then was art in college?
I never got a degree, but I went to 3 schools. I went to what's now BYU, Idaho. It was Rick's at the time. That was a great experience. It was 1 year.
Hmm.
And then a bunch of years later, I ended up going on a mission and getting cancer. So a bunch of years later, I picked up again at Salt Lake Community College.
Hmm.
And then I went to the University of Utah. And then in my last year at the University of Utah, I started selling paintings. So I quit. I didn't intentionally quit. I just never went back. And so I still don't have a degree.
Well, so you were doing good enough work in college that you were starting to make money from it, selling it.
Yeah, what happened was in my senior year, so I had a lot of credits. I probably have like over 200 credits or something, more than enough to have a degree, but they're all spread out between 3 schools.
Right.
So, and they weren't transferable. I kept starting over. So by the time I got to my senior year, to the end of my senior year at University of Utah, my credits just didn't line up, and I had 2 classes left to take. So everyone graduated but me. But I had won a scholarship to get a solo show at the end of the year. Some private collector comes in each year and picks one student out of the senior class to do a show. This year,
Wow.
he actually picked 2, me and a landscape guy.
Yeah.
And so it was a 2-person show. At the end of that show, the gallery picked me up. And then that summer, my career just blossomed. I mean, he was
Wow.
selling paintings faster than I could paint them. It was
Gosh.
crazy.
Wow. What were those paintings like? What would those look like? What were you painting?
So it was like the family portraits, but of strangers. I was
Hmm.
doing that. And some of those you can see on Instagram early in the Instagram page, really
Oh,
early.
okay.
And then, but in 2007 or 8, I stopped doing that. But in early on, that's what I was doing. But then also I started dabbling in the religious stuff early, and those were selling. And then I was getting family portrait commissions. People saw the portraits of strangers and they said, "Can you do something like that, but with my family?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, that'll be fun." So I
Wow.
started doing that. Yeah.
So you were really a hot shot as a senior in college. Of course, I feel like a degree, that and a cup of coffee, $5 gets
Yeah.
you coffee. Like, what do you
I
do with that?
know. I
That's
wasn't a hot shot. I
wow.
wasn't. It depends on how you look at it, because my school was not really, they didn't really appreciate realism. So I had a few teachers that did, but by the time I left, they had all been pushed out of the department. And
Wow.
now the department is really postmodern. It has been for 20 years. So
Yeah,
by the
right.
time I left, I mean, no one appreciated what I was doing. And,
Right.
but it worked out for me.
Yeah, so I mean, really, with so many artists I talked to who've gone on to get a master's, the only reason why they do that is in the hope of getting a teaching career, right?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
they have very little to do with the artwork that they're actually doing, from what I've seen anyway. So,
Yeah.
and all of that to say,
I
so
can't
that,
think of why you do it other than
yeah,
that.
right. So now, this is a side issue, but you're also teaching a lot of young artists. You have a school program going,
Yeah.
educational.
Young and old, mostly middle aged, actually. A lot of people that this is their second crack at it in life, you know?
Wow. Yeah.
Um, but I have students all the way from right now, I think my youngest is 16, all the way up to 70 or something. And I have an in-person atelier of 12 students. That's the limit.
Mm.
And then I have an online atelier where I take about 50 students.
Wow.
And yeah, and in the online atelier is the same as the in-person one, except online. It's the same curriculum. It's just modified for
Yeah.
online. and it's actually done really well. I mean, I'm not saying it's done well for the students. I mean, in
Yeah.
that they're growing faster than I thought was possible online, which has been kind of wild to watch.
Yeah. So
It's a
you
great
take
time to be alive
it
as an
really,
artist.
no question. Can you imagine if I when I was younger, I wish I had all the available resources that artists have today. You know, it's just so much going
Yeah,
on.
it's crazy. I
And
know.
you don't need to go to an art school if you wanted to really learn to
No.
paint. You don't need to mortgage your, be in debt for the rest of your life. Just get a college
There's
education.
so many good artists teaching online. You just search the internet and go, "Oh, that's the artist I want to
Yeah.
learn from." Chances are he's got something he's offering, from workshops to online teaching to something. I mean, you have the Masters Academy, right? Is that what you call this? Masters?
Well, we call it MFA, which is made for artists. MFA,
MFA.
the MFA,
Ah,
and it's
okay.
meant,
So yeah, so you've got something. So if I want to study with Quang Ho, I've got this, and it's like it's crazy. There's no way in 2000, when I was in school, I could have even dreamed of something like this.
yeah, no, it's true.
It's
So
wild.
so you take the students through a very methodical process of from beginning, right, to
Yeah,
advanced. So
yeah.
so when they enter your school, they're not entering as uh uh moderate, usually as a beginner, or do you just take
No,
anybody?
well, yes, usually, because that's just what people usually are, even if they don't realize it. So
Mm.
and what I mean by that is there are some advanced students that have stuff that they need to clean up that's in the beginning curriculum assignments.
Hmm.
So for example, I might get someone who's relatively advanced, but their accuracy is not quite tuned up. So I'll
Mm.
have them start in the beginning to do some of the beginning assignments, maybe not all of them, but just enough to kind of tighten them up a little bit. I don't mean tighten as in tight art, but just refine their
Focus.
accuracy skills a little bit better.
Hmm.
But in reality, I only have them do what they need. So it's not as though everyone starts at assignment 1 and goes to assignment, I don't know how many there are, but let's say 50 in order. It's not like that at all. It's at what they need. So if you come in and you're intermediate, you might start at assignment 25 and work to 50, or
Gotcha.
you might do assignment 15, jump to assignment 25 and go to 50. I mean, it all depends on what your weaknesses are. It's not like a 4-year school where you just pay your dues and get a degree. It's I work with you on your weaknesses.
Yeah.
And
So this
so
is
everyone's a little bit different, but there's a lot of overlap. A lot of people do the same stuff because a
so
lot of
it's
people have the same needs.
it's really hands-on. I mean, you're really hands-on with
Oh,
each person.
totally.
I see. Well, that's
Every week I'm with every person. Yeah.
wow, lucky them. That's amazing. So, but at
Well,
the same time,
thanks.
you have videos too, right? You have these videos, like lesson one is a video that they can
Yeah.
watch.
Videos for most of the lessons. Yep. And then we record all the critiques.
Yep.
And then I splice out all the highlights in the recorded critiques. There's hundreds of highlights where we have miniature lessons.
Hmm.
So we're building up so much content. It's kind of unbelievable.
Wow.
And then as we get these highlights, let's say someone has a problem with drawing the structure of the head, and in the critique, I might do a little demo that takes 20 minutes and it'll be added to that lesson. So that lesson of structure drawing of the head might have like 15, 20
Mm.
different sub lessons,
Yeah,
as time goes on.
that's great.
So
I might have to send Liam to you. You know,
yeah, I think he's in good hands, man. There's no way.
his parents are very undisciplined. I need him to get some discipline from somewhere.
Yeah, he's one lucky kid to have you two as parents. I'll tell you what.
Oh, thank you. That's fun. So in indirect way, asking you about these lessons, I'm asking about how you approach painting. So, are you?
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about that. Do you focus on structure first, or drawing first, or the idea? How do you start a painting? How do you arrive at?
Well, I guess it depends on the painting. If it's a portrait, it's very different. If it's just like a single head portrait, that's obviously very different than a multi-figure painting. So, that's one of the frustrations I have as a painter is I really don't, I bet you can relate to this. Maybe not, I don't know, but I would bet you do. I just cannot nail down a process. And even after 20, what has it been? 22 years of painting professionally, I still feel like every time I start a painting, I don't know what I'm doing and I just am flying by the seat of my pants.
Really?
And oh yeah. I mean, there are some things that I'll do over and over again, but it's hit and miss, you know? But
But
in general, let's say it's just a portrait. My drawing painting process is, I think, very much in terms of shape initially, and then I reinforce that with structure. Where a lot of people might think more in terms of structure first. I think in terms of shape patterns. And but when it comes to more complex work, which is mostly what I do, that's still the case, but that's simply the case in the individual elements. But when I'm conceiving a painting, the idea comes first, and it's typically a narrative of some kind. And then I figure out how to execute this idea, you know, how to round up models, whether or not I have to make costumes, whether or not I have to do maquettes. Oftentimes I have to build maquettes. Oftentimes I have to do little miniature costumes and then build big life-size costumes that match.
wow.
I figure out what kind of lighting I need in miniature and full size.
I want to
And
interrupt you real quick. I don't interrupt
yeah,
you. Going back to that big still life that I really love, the one with
yeah,
the stuff in it,
yeah,
stuff, consumer stuff.
yeah.
Um,
Consumer stuff. Yeah.
to me, it has a beautiful structure of darks, and then the few bits of whites and the bright yellows, and so the high chromas. But it's sitting on a beautiful ground of dark. Did you conceive of that first, or did you just start putting stuff together and then that's what it became? You see what I
No,
mean?
I just did it the way you would arrange a still life on a table. And it took, if I remember right, it took 3 weeks
Whoa.
just arranging it. Yeah. It was
Whoa.
brutal. Well, because think about it. It was 3 layers deep, right? So if I got started, by the time I'm stacking the fourth, or I'm sorry, the last layer, the most surface layer, if I
Mhm.
got to change something, I got to take it down and rebuild it.
Oh, for heaven's
And
sakes.
so, oh, it's tedious as heck. So I was just throwing things in there and like, oh no, there's too much color here, too little here, too much light here, too much dark there, and just constantly moving things around until it came together. In much the same way you would design an abstract painting. Just I need a little splash of color here. I need a little bit more light over here, so I'll throw a little coat or a clock or a guitar or whatever that has that light color, and then just keep moving things around. So it was just like arranging a still, or I imagine many artists arrange a still life. Exactly the same, just much more tedious.
So at some point, that dark ground became logical that you have this dark with few bits
Oh
of
yeah, of
light.
course.
Yeah. But it was,
Yeah,
but
but
you,
I didn't have the only initial idea I had is
that's
that I
right.
wanted to look like a giant, big, full closet.
Yeah.
That was it. And then I built the structure, and then I just collected everything I could find from friends and family, and then just started throwing things up and sitting back on a chair and looking at it for an hour and then going back at it.
Wow, that's really cool. Well,
Yeah.
that's the reason why I asked that. Do you start with a structure? Do you start with an idea? Because oftentimes when I do a painting, if I have something big that I want to tackle, I can invent a structure in maybe in 15 minutes, and I can tell whether it's not gonna work or not, you know, based on how big the massive dark is, how big the massive light is, and media and how they interact, you know, and if I
Yeah.
like that, I can make everything else work inside of that. And so that painting was so beautifully structured and orchestrated. I was wondering if you
Oh,
started
I
that.
appreciate that.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. Since I'm so literal, and at the time with that painting so academic about getting everything precise,
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I had the ability. Sorry, my computer is beeping at me, and I'm not sure why. But I'm not. I didn't feel like I had the ability to just go in and start laying paint down until I had that whole still life in.
Interesting.
Your paintings are so spontaneous, and a lot of them are imagination.
Mm.
And I'm assuming a lot of your decisions are imagination.
More and more.
So yeah, so you can kind of go in and say, I want something here, I want something there. With me, I knew I needed the narrative, and the concept had to be the foundation of the painting. So the objects had I needed to put the objects in first and figure out where they were going before I could start designing the canvas. It just didn't seem possible. But there are paintings I have where I start by designing a canvas.
Yeah.
So again, it's like, it just depends. I still feel like I don't have one way of doing things.
Well, your paintings are deceptively realistic because at a glance they look like, you know, they're realist paintings, and that shows your keen attention to detail. But when you look at your painting up close, they're beautiful. The jewel, that's just like the paint is like alive, you know. And I love
Thanks,
showing
man. Thanks.
that detail of the eye that, you know, in my little tag, you know, little blurb
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
I'm like looking at
My
that.
eye.
So much color. That's your eye. That's right. There was like
Right.
so
Yep.
little dabs of blue where it shouldn't be, and you know. So talk about that. How do you think about color like that?
I call it optical mixing. I'm sure I picked that up somewhere.
Hmm.
And particularly on organic objects, basically anything organic. I feel like
Hmm.
in nature, color is unpredictable. And I want to have that same unpredictability in my paintings. So it could be straw or wood or skin or denim or anything that's made of natural material. I'm very careful to not paint broad regions of simple color, but to put in some level of spontaneity and unpredictability. And then
Wow.
let those colors kind of intermingle in a way that they average out to the right general and local color of the thing. And because I find if the only time it works for me to consider the local color when painting something is things like plastics, where it's just supposed to be completely perfect and even. But most things in nature just aren't that way. You know,
What?
they're particularly skin. It's like, it's
Yeah.
so unpredictable. You know, there could be little capillaries and just blemishes and imperfections and pores. And I have no interest in painting those things from observation, but I can suggest those things by just kind of building a little bit of chaos into the color.
Wow. I've never heard anybody talk about it quite like that, Jeff. That's no
Oh,
wonder.
really?
Yeah, no wonder they no what they draw me in. Like, you know, the look at especially your little portraits. No wonder that thing won second place at the Portrait Society. Because I remember it was only about not very big,
No,
but
it's just life size.
yeah, it just pulls you in, all those jewel-like color. But you use a lot of high chroma. There's a lot of chroma in that. It's not like
Yeah,
you
in
use,
my palette, I have
yeah.
20, 28, 27, 28 colors on my palette, and they're all but maybe all but just maybe two earth tones are high chroma colors. And
Whoa.
I go for the highest chroma colors I can find,
What?
which is completely opposite. It's funny. I was interviewing someone today that studied with Odd Nerdrum who
Yeah.
has nothing but dull colors except for a red. And that's
Wow.
completely foreign to me. I go for the highest chroma possible, and I let the two chromas, you know, a high chroma red and a high chroma green, sit next to each other to make a brown instead of using a brown. I'd rather see the chroma sort of, I don't know, I'm doing this with my hand because it's sort of like, I don't know, just sort of sparkle next to each other. And
Yeah.
in some way they cancel each other out, but in another way they sort of accentuate each other. And
So you'll
I'm
blend
just,
them together.
yeah, sometimes they blend. You can't avoid blending them together, but I
Yeah.
like them also to be sitting next to each other
Okay.
and optically mixing in your eye, not so much on the canvas. So
Do
there's
you
both,
do you teach
both
this?
of them.
This?
Do what?
Do you teach this in your courses?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And some students take to it and some don't. It's not for everybody. Yeah.
Interesting.
And so
Interesting.
I don't teach it. I don't teach it with the intention of having my students paint like me. My goal is to have them paint like them. In other words, I
Right.
believe that everyone, just like, you know, I've used this analogy many times, but when I see myself on film and I see myself walking and moving and talking, it kind of freaks me out how much I look like my little brother. Not even the way we look, just the way we move, right?
Yeah.
And I think those kinds of things show up in brushstrokes and just all the little tiny little micro decisions an artist makes
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to do as a teacher is not over teach them to the degree that I take out all of their mannerisms. Another analogy that relates to the walking thing is I saw this podcast once where this runner was, he was a runner, an amateur runner, and hold on, let me unplug something real quick.
Sure.
Maybe that'll fix it. Something, I'm gonna fall now. Something keeps on beeping at me.
We can't hear
So
it.
this guy, oh, you can't hear it? Oh, good. So this amateur runner who's also a reporter of some sort, he joins this temporarily just to report on his Olympic running team. And he was shocked to find out that the coach doesn't teach the way his amateur coaches have taught him, because he's always had coaches, but just on an amateur level. He said that what was different is that this Olympic coach said, I work with the runner with the way the runner already runs, the way they were made to run, because they have their skeletons that are different than the next runner's skeleton. They have their muscle, the unique muscle shape and arrangement. And I mean, obviously our muscles are all generally arranged the same, but you know, you might have a longer calf than the next guy. You might have, you know, there's subtle differences. And so it's going to affect the way you naturally run. And so this Olympic coach said, look, if they're really going to be good, they have to work with the bones and muscles that they have. So if I try and teach them the quote unquote right way to run, I got to break them down and then try and build them up in someone else's body. And so even if I'm successful, they'll never reach their full potential. Yeah. And I see that with art. When I'm teaching somebody, I don't want to break them down to make them paint the way I think a painting should look. I want to teach them principles and figure out what their mannerisms are. And I don't even have to figure it out. I just have to not get in the way. You know, I don't even have to figure it out. If I just teach them principles and give them everything I know and put it out there and make sure they understand everything I know without pushing it on them in a way that they have to paint in a particular way, then every student is going to just paint the way they're naturally meant to paint. Yeah. That just like I walk the way I'm meant to walk. It's just, I can't help it. It's in my DNA. Right. So, yes, do I teach them to paint the way I paint? I teach them all of the skills that I have that make it possible for me to paint the way I paint. So I have lessons about optical mixing, for example, but it's not with the goal for them to paint like me. It's something I know. So here's the other thing I know. If you want to paint like me, fine, paint like me. And here's what I know that makes it possible. Take it or leave it. Yeah. That's my approach. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So even with somebody who's just a rank beginner who first comes in, you can recognize they have tendencies and then you work with that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Cool. I'll tell you what, with my students, I could walk in my room and there's 12 of them in there and they could just lay out all of the work they're doing randomly. And I could pick out each one of, I could totally say that's Sean, that's Paloma, that's Naomi. I could totally tell whose is whose, and not based on, they're all about the same level coincidentally right now. It's not about level. It's because they all have a way of making marks and I haven't screwed that up. I haven't told them to do it the way I do it. I just let them do it and said, get the right value, get the right shape, get the right chroma, get the right edge, so on and so forth. But I don't care if you stick the brush in your rear end and spin, as long as you get those things right, whatever makes you feel, makes you happy, whatever makes you happy, do it, So
have you found that there's a level of proficiency that after taking your entire course that these artists are going on to start their career?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm being completely honest and transparent. My course, most people don't get through the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And this is why, because I have a theory and a way of teaching. Is it a theory? Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Let's just say policy. I have a policy that I implement with teaching. And that is, I don't let people move on until they've proven that they can do what I'm teaching them in any particular area of the curriculum without my help.
That's great. Yeah, that's great.
Because far too many students leave the tutelage of their teacher and they still can't actually do what they do without their teacher's critique, right? And so my goal for every student is for them to prove to me that they can do it before they move on to the next more difficult concept. And so
Mhm.
what happens is somebody can get stuck for a while on one thing and they're not getting it. And where most institutions, they'll way, well, you've drawn for 2 years, so time to paint. With me, it's
Mhm.
like, no, you're still not good at it. Like I'll make new assignments for you. I'll tutor you more. I'll work harder with you, but you're not moving on until you get it. And so what happens is a lot of people drop out. They're like, I just don't want to do this.
Wow.
It's not worth it to me. So the turnover rate is pretty high, people. And so, but the people that stick around and finish all do well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I imagine those
Yes.
people. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's
Yeah, they
interesting.
all do well, but it's not that many, a lot of people are like, oh, this is too much. Like, I'm not going to draw for another 6 months is what it's looking like it's going to be. And I'm like, sorry, I'm not going to teach you value if you can't even get the nose in the right place. Like, I'm not
Yeah,
doing it. You got to figure this stuff out,
yeah. Well, and they
So,
won't enjoy it either. You know what I mean? In the end, they won't enjoy painting very much if they keep getting the drawing off. Because no matter
well,
what color,
some do. I mean, some live in ignorant bliss. I mean, haven't you seen that? There are people. I mean, you've taught a lot of workshops, right? A lot of people live in ignorant bliss. They don't know what they don't know,
that's funny.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I know you've seen that.
yeah.
And I'm not saying that to insult people.
No,
I
I think
live in ignorant bliss. I don't know what I don't know. I mean, it's
yeah,
amazing having my podcast and realizing how much I have to learn. I mean, I know I have a lot to learn, but speaking to people at your caliber in my podcast and God, I got so much to learn. And I look at my paintings and I just can't make them better, even though I know they need to be better. I mean, so we're all there. It's just at different levels, right? We all can't figure out what we don't know at some level until all of a sudden it clicks one day and we're like, oh man, that's why I couldn't do what I've been trying to do for 20 years.
that's what I've noticed even in your interviews. Like I've been binging on them for a while too. They're wonderful. And every
Thanks.
good artist will talk about how I don't know what I'm doing. And it's
Yeah, I know.
I don't know what the next painting is gonna be. And I'm just, and I was watching the one you were talking to, Tim Lawson, and he's wonderful. If I
He's
listen,
amazing.
he's so amazing, so articulate, and so thoughtful about what he was saying. But I would just, he was showing you the color charts, and I was just cracking up because you didn't know what the concept was, right? And I remember they
No,
made do color charts in art school, but they didn't explain it the way that Tim did. So we would just
no,
mix.
he's brilliant.
But it just shows you we each have so much room to explore and to learn yet. And
It's interesting you bring up Tim Lawson too, because that's a perfect example of this idea of temperament and that we all kind of have our own mannerisms, our own temperaments. And because I really wanted when I did that podcast with him, because I admire him so much, I really wanted to do those color charts. I just can't bring myself to do it. It's just not in me.
mm,
I just can't do it. And so I had this, when I was done, I'm like, I'm going to do this thing because I mean, this guy's brilliant and this is
mm.
what he does. I'm going to try it. I think I sat down in front of a canvas to start a color chart for about a minute and a half. And I'm like, nope, can't do it. That's just not in me. I just can't. I got to get back to painting. Like,
Oh, tell the truth.
I don't know if you call it impatience or just, I don't know what you call it, but,
Hey,
um,
guilty,
yeah,
guilty over here.
yeah,
You know,
I just can't, but
yeah,
it works for him. It works for his personality.
oh,
That's the way he thinks.
yeah. Well, I'm being
Yeah.
forced into having to do it because I told you I'm not a very good colorist, and the reason why I
Oh
say
my
that,
gosh. You're
no,
so,
no,
that's crazy.
I can't dial it up the way that it's like, oh, I have to dig around for it until I find it, and I want to be able to see it. So I think if I did a
Well,
chart.
how do you define colorist though? I'm sorry to cut you off. How do you define colorist? What makes a good colorist?
Oh, a good colorist is like I was talking about like a good musician who can hear a note and say, "Oh, that's B flat or A sharp," and you
Oh, see, I don't think it that way. So you're saying a good colorist is someone who can nail it, just like quickly pull a color up off their palette and fast.
and
See,
resonate beautifully with the color that they have down already.
oh, that part I agree with. The
Yeah,
first part, I'm like, but the second part, I would say, yeah, but I would say you have that, the second part. I don't know about the first part. Although I've watched you do demos too, and you have the first part too. You're just too humble.
I'm,
That's a,
if I'm working from life, I can get it. I can get it. That's really not, that's
yeah,
really
yeah,
for me. When I'm working in the studio and inventing a harmony, you know what I mean? I have
yeah, yeah.
it's a different kind of thing. It's like orchestrating a piece of classical music, and you go "La, la, la," la," and just like maybe it was like half a note above it, you know what I mean? But I can't like like half of these paintings in my studio, that stupid painting back there is driving me insane for like a year now, but I can't find that
Wow.
right blue for the sky. And like, I'm ready to scrape it. You know, it could be
No,
that.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Drives me insane. And
Well,
Tim,
I suppose there might be someone alive that could do it faster than you, but I think it's a stretch. But I don't. I can't imagine who that person is.
Kevin Westphal.
You're the fastest painter in the West.
My wife misunderstands me. she
That's what she calls you, and it's right.
she told
Yeah.
you in an interview, I'm like, oh my gosh, she doesn't get me yet. I'm not the fastest.
Yes,
So
you are,
slow.
dude. I've seen you paint.
Oh, I swear.
Yeah.
Yes. But no, there's an artist I have to tell you. If you look him up, his name is Kevin Weckbach, and he was one of my first students a long time ago, and he is one of the best colorists I've ever seen. He'll stand
Really?
he'll stand in a scene looking like one of the houses in Denver. I had a painting for a while, and he stood in the neighborhood and looked at this house, and he changed the whole color scheme of it to a higher and blues, and he changed the whole scheme of the color, and it's glorious.
Yeah. I'm not. I feel like I'm not that good at that either.
Yeah, I know I'm not good at that. I could do it to a certain level, but Kevin can do it over and over, and he can move it from one thing to another. I'm like, dude, he sees color in a whole different way, and that's what I mean about.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I get that.
yeah, well, anyway,
Huh. Well, I used to think of myself as a colorist, but after you described it that way, now I don't know if I am anymore.
You're a good guy.
Crap, man. You just destroyed my self-esteem.
Your colors are so beautiful and clean, and I can't say that about my colors.
Yeah, but I can't do what you just described that well. That's a frustration I also have.
Oh, look at that eye that I was talking about. That you look in that eye that you did of your eye, and
No,
it
but
just
that's different than global decisions that you're talking about that your student has. Though that's hard. You
global.
know who else does that well? Oh shoot. I was interviewing a landscape painter and now I'm forgetting. He's in Arizona. Matt, Matt. Anyway, I'm gonna remember it in a minute. But he can just take a painting and just he can take like a day painting and turn it into a night painting. And
Oh,
everything just works.
yeah.
Right. And that kind of stuff kind of amazes me too.
Wow.
Actually, a
Well,
lot of people I've interviewed can do that. Come to
well,
think of it.
you you've interviewed some great artists. So let
Yeah,
me.
a lot of them can.
So one of the things I've been dying
Matt
to.
Smith. Sorry,
Oh,
Matt Smith. It's Matt
good.
Smith. Too
Matt
many names in my head now. Yeah.
Matt is a magician.
Yeah.
He's so amazing. He's accurate as crap when he's on
Is
location.
he?
Yeah.
Is he? I mean, I assumed he was, but I've never seen his subject matter.
And I watched one of
Yeah.
his people one time. He did the whole painting with a flat brush about that big, that wide, the whole thing was done with one brush. He's
Isn't
amazing.
he the one that says that's all he has in his whole arsenal? Like he just paints with one brush and he's got like 15 of the same brush?
I don't know, really. I didn't know that. I could believe it after I
Well,
saw
there's one landscape painter. It was either him or another one that said that that's it. They just use one brush, and it's all flats. They're bristles, and they're like an inch or 3/4 wide. And to make a fine mark, he just turns it on its side, and to make a
Yeah,
broad mark, he'll.
that
Yeah,
was
I
what.
bet it might have been him. Or it might have been Bill Anton too. I can't remember, but
Bill was another one.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I've been dying to ask you about this, the whole thing with all of your interviews. You're like what they call it, Akashic record. You're the keeper of knowledge now, right? Like if
Yeah.
you if you wanted
Maybe
to,
on my hard drive, not here.
oh my gosh. I mean, after all those interviews, and each one, like I get a little nugget of something each time I watch one, right?
Yeah, me
Technical,
too.
huh? What do you do? Like Tim Lawson talking about his color, and Bill Anton, who talked about his education with his studying with all the different ones, and then Mark Boges, who taught himself practically. He studied with Richard,
Dude.
but those
Yeah.
guys, his color sense, his edges and everything. Is there one thing that you take away from all of these interviews that have taught you about artists in general, the good artists? Are there particular
You
traits?
sort of mentioned one thing. You mentioned one thing early on, and it amazes me. All these artists are the same, with very few exceptions. And I would say the only exception, well, I'm not even talking about the ones I've interviewed. I think that's the case for all the ones I've interviewed. But this idea has just been proven in my mind that a great artist always has a little bit of insecurity. Like there is no great artist none of the artists I've interviewed that I know of think of themselves or take themselves too seriously. And they all seem to just be hungry to get better. And it just seems like they just don't feel like they've arrived. That's just what I'm taking from it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what feeds them, because they're just hungry for more, and they just continue to grow and they don't stay stagnant. And it's just amazing how consistent that is among all the interviews I've had. And there might be something I don't know. I mean, there may be some artists that maybe I read them wrong, but that's what it seems like to me, that they're all just humble and hungry.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. But as far as technique and stuff goes, man, there's been so many things I couldn't narrow it down. I think one thing that's maybe too obvious I've learned is that there's so many ways to skin a cat. Like, it just amazes me how different everybody is.
Yeah.
One of the best interviews for me personally was Joe Paquette. And it's a combination of things with that interview. And that was because I think I needed what he said at the time a lot. And he just said a lot of things about landscape painting that elevated my work noticeably from the day before the interview to the next time I went painting plein air after the interview. I saw a difference in my paintings just by talking to him.
That's amazing.
And that hasn't happened again. I mean, I've had subtle little differences in painting, but really not significant. And I wish they were, but I know they're helping me. But you get to a point where it's just tiny little things, right? You get to a point where you're going to grow if you grow 1% every month, in my opinion, you're doing great, right? Because by the end of the year, that's 12%. That's a huge jump.
That's amazing.
And that's how it feels. But with him, I tell you what, with him in that interview, I think I grew like 10 or 12% or even more after one interview. And it was wild. I listened to his like 3 or 4 times. So it's partly because he's a great teacher, partly because he had the answers I was looking for at the time. And it was just great,
Everybody go watch that video, that interview. But can you sum it up for us, at least while we're talking to you, what that was?
One of the things he said was, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you. This is live. This is live, right? You can't edit this out. I'm all in.
Undraped.
Yeah, I'm really undraped. So I should know this, but it's embarrassing how little I know. And after all these years,
that's funny.
So I'm not a landscape painter. I'm getting better at it. And I can do good landscapes in a bigger painting if I really put my mind to it. But I'm no Matt Smith or Bill Anton or, all these great plein air painters I've interviewed. Like when I get outside, I really lack confidence. And so one of the things I thought I needed before interviewing Joe was I needed a shorthand. I felt like, because I see so many landscape painters out there that have like a way of painting a bush that is really unique to them, or a few strokes and twists of the wrists and flicks of the brush that kind of make their paintings interesting, or at least unique, right? And I thought my problem is, when I'm painting, I don't know how to make a bush look like a bush and have this sort of unique style that's all my own. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was crippled by that. And so I'd go out and I'd struggle so much just trying to figure out what my bush looks like instead of really analyzing that bush. And that's what he corrected in me. He said, look, Jeff, I can't remember how he put it. Joe Paquette, as you know, you met him recently. It's
Yeah.
very blunt, right? He said
Yeah.
something like, it's all calligraphy. It's all calligraphy. All this flicking of the wrist and twirling of the brush. It's calligraphy. He's like, no, you just look at that. You look at that bush and you ask yourself, is that a feathered edge? Is that a jagged edge? Is that rounded edge? I mean, and you just describe it the way that it is. And he's very, very blunt about it. He's like, enough of this tricks, none of these tricks and devices and all this. And I'm like, and he freed me, I was like,
Wow.
you're right. I'm after the wrong thing. I know this in the studio. I know this because I do it with the portrait. But for some reason, because I've seen so many landscape painters with this, what Joe would call calligraphy, that I must need this calligraphy to be a good landscape painter. And he freed me from it. So I went outside and I was just Jeff.
Wow.
And for the first time, I dropped the insecurity and I said, no, I know how to observe. I've been observing for a long time in the studio. And I was just Jeff. And what I mean by just Jeff is that I don't have a calligraphy in the studio. Why do I need one in the field? I don't have a calligraphy at all. So just look hard at the bush and paint the bush and figure out what makes that bush and what makes that bush different than the bush next to it and paint that. Yeah. And, oh man, it was huge.
Well, you dropped a wonderful nugget in our audience. I think that's really.
Well, I didn't drop it. I'm just sharing what Joe gave to me, so I can't.
The fact that you shared what a great artist like you're still having to think about all this stuff to, just like me thinking about colors, like, oh, what? So
yeah.
When I hear, Tim Lawson talk about color, I'm like, oh, I definitely can adopt that. And I'm sure it'll make me a better colorist overnight if I spend 10 minutes to do the color charts, just getting out there and doing it. But that's like, I'm asked a lot, like, I want to learn to paint loosely like you do. Some of my students will ask me that. And I tell them, well, I never think about my brushstrokes. When I'm painting, I never think about the brushstrokes. I'm thinking about the shape I'm making, and the brushstroke follows that. So, but if I'm trying to be loose, it doesn't work. It never does. Then it becomes.
That's a brilliant nugget right there. And that's kind of like what he's saying.
Yeah.
Stop with the calligraphy. Just make the shape, make the edge.
Yeah. Yeah. The brushstroke. Yeah. Anyway, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting from all the interviews I've watched is, like, you talk about how you have 20 something colors. I have like about 14, and I feel embarrassed to have that many, because I've seen Scott Burdick do a painting with red and green. I'm like, are you kidding me? He uses a few colors and it looks so full and rich. And I realized that color is there's no real rule to that. It's just right? Don't you think?
No, I totally do. And I've done limited palette and I can do limited palette and I'm comfortable with it. But I can't, if I have to mix, really, like, let's say I want a phthalo green. You can't mix that. If I want that chroma that only a phthalo green provides in my skin, and you can't mix it. And no, you're never going to see phthalo green skin in my paintings. That's the interesting thing, is that it's always going to be flesh color. Whereas you might see one phthalo green in a Susan Lyon painting where she's just using two colors, or even a Scott Burdick. But my point is, I want a little touch of phthalo green next to a little touch of Viridian or Parylene or something. And I want that chroma. And if I have to mix it, I lose that chroma, because when those two notes of chroma sit next to each other and they're opposite, they cancel each other out. And there's something kind of magical about that, standing back from a painting and not seeing the color, but only seeing skin. and then walking up and going, what the crap? There's phthalo green in that. I didn't
Yeah.
see it from back there. And so I can do that with a limited palette, but not really. I mean, if I'm just working with 3 or 4 colors, I can't optically mix. It's just, there's just no color to do it. By the time I've mixed my blue, I've already grayed it down, or you don't mix a blue. It's obviously why I don't know why I said that. By the time I mix my green or my orange, I've already sort of killed the chroma a little bit. And so I'm not optically mixing anymore. I'm mixing. I'm literally mixing. So
Yeah,
that's
how I work.
why I do that. But
Yeah, when you look at like an original fashion and you see just chroma bubbling through
I've
this,
never seen an original fetching. Is that the way his look?
oh my God, are you kidding me?
No, I've never seen one. I'm jealous.
Will blow your mind. You need to go see
Man.
original fashion. He does from a distance, it looks very naturalistic, but when you get up close, it's like a bubbling of colors coming through the surface that is mesmerizing. It's really beautiful.
I didn't know that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah, it's really
I feel
beautiful.
like I picked it up from Rembrandt is what I was really looking at.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't feel like I paint like Rembrandt, but I'm definitely influenced by Rembrandt, particularly lately. In some of the early work you showed, I was interested in Thibaut, but now I'm more Rembrandt.
Hmm.
Um,
Atmospheric.
yeah, but I'm trying to push it a little further for good or for bad.
How do
That
you mean further?
like, well, what I mean is more surprising color than I even saw in Rembrandt's.
Oh, I
I'm
like it.
trying to, but for like I
Yeah,
said, for good or for bad.
I'm good getting goosebump at that idea. I think it's wonderful. You got, that little impulse. And
Yeah,
I would,
that's my impulse. But
yeah. Well, I was going to ask you where you might see your work going next, but before I do that, I want to ask you about your religious paintings because they're really big,
yeah,
right? And,
yeah.
and how do those come about? Are they commissions or are they paintings you do for yourself?
Well, they always were paintings I did for myself until, well, they still are. But what
Hmm.
happened was, I don't know, 15 years ago, I had sold a bunch of paintings privately, religious paintings privately, and they're never seen because they're in someone's home. And
Oh.
um, I
Hmm.
thought, how cool would it be to paint? Because I've always wanted to paint the life of Christ. And I've been kind of sort of picking away at it one at a time. And then they go to different places. And it
Hmm.
feels like they should all be together. And I just had this dream to paint the whole life of Christ for a single collection. And I'm fortunate that
Wow.
that a fair number of my clients support this dream and
Hmm.
support it financially and conceptually. And
Hmm.
they're paying for me to do this, to paint the entire life of Christ, and then they're going to build a museum for it that's devoted to the collection.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's so fantastic.
How many
So that's what
paintings?
well, my goal is 25, but if I live long enough, I'll do more, and if
Wow.
the funds provide, um, and it's happening, but yet it's not done. So these things, who knows, until the museum literally opens its doors in 10 or 15 years,
Hmm.
it's still a goal, but it is being funded. And so it seems like it's happening. It's wild.
So do you have sketches for all these yet or doodles for them yet?
No, that's what I mean. They're just giving me complete freedom. They're just
Yeah.
saying, okay, here you go.
No,
Go ahead.
I meant for yourself. Are you working out?
No, because I have such a short attention span, totally, to- totally short attention span. If I prepared all of them in advance, I'd be bored. If I prepared 12, by the time I got to 2, I would have changed my mind about number 2. I
Interesting.
mean, that fast. So I just got to do one at a time, at the most 2 at a time. And then by the time I'm done with the second one, I'll be excited about the third one. But if I plan the third one ahead, I won't be excited about it anymore when I get to it. So that's just the way I am. I learned that a long time ago. So I have a general idea of the subjects I want to paint, but even that's not set in stone. I'm just sort of taking it one painting at a time, whatever I'm excited about that year, because they take a long time. And that's the one I do. So
Well, the reason why I asked that is because the idea of doing a monumental painting like that would I like, do I start like the way that you did all those figures, and you said that you did them all from life? Did you do them all from life based on rough layout design, or did you just place them there, paint them,
Oh,
move on to?
no. So that it was that was a there it's like Frankenstein process because you can't
Really?
see the scene, right? It doesn't exist. And I can't set up in my studio. So the way I did that was I started with just drawings from imagination that were
Right.
really crude, just to get the general composition. Then once I settled on that, it was just in black and white pencil and a sketchbook, right? Once I settled on that, then I built a maquette. In this case, it was 1/12 scale. Now I work in 1/6 scale. But in that case, it was so many people, I worked in 1/12 scale. So they were like Star Wars figures, like this big
Wow.
Star Wars size figures. In fact, I actually used Star Wars figures for it. But I bought a bunch of Star Wars figures and then just put little costumes on top of their costumes. But
No.
I built the building out of foam, wood, metal, whatever materials I needed to build it out of. And I put all these little Star Wars figures in it, figured out, I lit it like the sun and, figured out if it all worked. And then I did a
Okay.
more elaborate color study from the maquette with the little Star Wars figures and figured out what problems arose from that. Then I did, once I was comfortable with the color study, then I was getting ready to put it on the canvas. Then I did a perspective drawing of the maquette. So that was just math for 3 weeks. That took me 3 weeks, and did a
Crazy.
full, really detailed perspective drawing where I can get all the figures exactly where they're supposed to be standing, exactly the right size, and all mapped out. And obviously, the building was also in perspective.
Wow.
Then I did it again on the canvas. So I didn't just transfer the perspective drawing because these things are so precise that if you're off by an eighth of an inch, the lines don't recede appropriately. So rather than
Wow.
projecting it or gridding it, I actually just redid the perspective drawing on the canvas by using lasers from all the way across. My studio is 50 feet long. So I had a laser on one end, a laser on the other, and just shot them across the room as my lines of perspective and just
Yeah.
changed the angle and drew the line and then, did the whole thing again in perspective. And then I just took that 1/12 scale perspective drawing. And I had that sitting there for 2 years on the table. And every time I needed to add a figure, I went in there and calculated how big it needed to be, went to the big canvas and did everything 12 times the size, calculated where it needs to be, and just added the figure in the appropriate place. And then what I did was I would bring in live models. This was sort of mixed throughout. I'd bring in live models. I'd calculate where I need to be standing relative to them in the studio to get the right perspective
Wow.
on them based on the perspective drawing.
Wow.
And I would do a live study of each of them. I have dozens and dozens and dozens of them.
Uh-huh.
And then I'd draw the live study from the study onto the canvas. And then I bring them, once that's done and in the right place from the drawing, then I bring the live model back and I would paint them from life. And then I would paint their clothes from mannequins. And so it's
Gracious.
really, oh, dude, it's so much. And that's why
I'm gonna.
now that I'm using photography, it's like it speeds up the process so dramatically. A lot of those things
Yeah.
still need to be done because I can't just
Yeah.
photograph the whole scene.
Right.
But with photography, I don't have to do all the sketches.
Right.
But that's really what it eliminates. But that's a huge chunk of time, right? And so I replaced
Yeah.
the sketches with the photographs. But it's still that sketching process could take months because depending on
I'm
how
gonna
many
show.
figures there are.
Yeah. I want to show that painting again now that we've talked about it. That is so
And it's
great.
not, I know you're not supposed to say bad things about your painting. I'm not good enough to do a painting like this. I just did the best that I could. It's
Good.
so hard.
That's
I did the
all
best that I could.
beautiful that is. Holy smoke. But that's what we
Man,
all,
I appreciate that.
that's all we did. I think it's amazing what you did here. This is
But even
great.
like the figures in motion, it was like this woman, these people up here cheering. I would tie their legs up to the ceiling or to a wall. I would, with this girl clapping in the background, or with them
What?
cheering. I have them cheer for like 30 seconds and draw as fast as I can, and then let them rest, and then have them do it again, draw as fast as I can. But like, see this little, don't move, hold that right there. See that little yelling, my daughter, then in the yellow back here?
Yeah, yeah, I was looking at it.
That little girl yelling or screaming. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, she was probably 11 then, and she held that for like 5 seconds at a time. I draw from memory, have her do it again, draw from memory, have her do it again. And
What?
same with this guy back here. And all these expressions are all drawn mostly from memory, and then because I can't hold them, right?
Right.
And so it was really challenging
You
to
didn't
do it.
have money
And then
for
what's that?
you didn't have money for a camera.
No, man, I was too poor. No, it was that's it. I know you're kidding, but that's it. Important probably that I explain why I do this.
Yeah.
It's not, or did this for 14 years because I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't a product of the 21st century.
Oh,
And I wanted to prove to myself, because I did a multi-figure painting. I've done multi-figure painting since the beginning.
yeah.
And one day I finished a multi-figure painting. Then I went into my books and I was looking at a Da Vinci painting and saw all the studies he did and realized that with the way that in their time, it was so much more difficult to do it.
Yeah.
And
I suppose.
because of the Frankensteining, it's not more difficult to paint a portrait from life. It's easier because it just holds still and it's all the information's there. But multi-figure is a whole different thing. It's so much more difficult to do multi-figure from life. So, and I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew that. So I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. So I spent 14 years proving to myself that I could do it. That's the only reason I did it. It wasn't like working from life is better, working from life is superior. I'm not a purist. I
Yeah.
just had a goal. And it's like, I follow people on Instagram that do things like professional dunkers. And there'll be guys that all they do is dunk. And it's just, are they saying dunking is more important than basketball? Of course not. They just have this obsession with proving to themselves that they can jump 50 inches, that they can get a 50-inch vertical. It doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but they have this, they want to prove to themselves that they can do it. That's the way it was for me. It was this obsession. Like, can I do hard things? You know?
I love that.
And then I got to COVID, and COVID sort of forced my hand and said, it forced me to go back to cameras. And then I realized, you know what? I may not have done as good of paintings as I would have liked to have done.
Yeah.
But I at least proved to myself that I can do a multi-figure painting from life. And so it's time to just relax. Like, I'm 50 years old. It's time to relax. Like, I gotta start getting some work done, man. It's like, I gotta be more productive. And so cameras help me to be more productive. And so now I'm splitting it up between life and cameras and trying to get more done faster. And the other thing is, with this project, I'm just not going to live long enough to finish if I work from life all the time. I gotta get, and it's more important to me now that I get the project done than that I continue to prove this to myself. So, I think I've proven it enough to myself to be happy. I don't care what the world thinks. I had a certain standard that I was after, and I think I've gotten to that. And now I'm ready to kind of use more tools and be a little more productive.
I think you touched on a really important part of growing as an artist, is because what drives us on to try to do the next painting, the better painting, except for to do it better, to prove something like to yourself. Can I do that a little bit better? Sometimes I'll take the same composition I did 20 years ago and I'm redoing it now. I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could do better. You know what I mean? So I'm trying that kind of thing now. But one of the things in the future I want to do is multi-figure epic paintings. And I've never
you'd
done
be
it.
so good at it.
Well, I don't know that. I'm not so sure
Oh,
about
you would. You're brilliant. You do it. You do it so good. You know
Well,
what? The funny thing about what you just said, though, is that's what's so weird about this goal I had, is that going into it, I knew I would actually not do it better. I would do it worse. And yet I did it. It was like, because it makes perfect sense, right? To have that goal to constantly improve. And this was a weird way of improving. I knew I would improve here, but to the world looking in, I would be looking dumber every painting I did because my paintings are actually getting worse while I was getting better. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? It's like it was very frustrating for me because when I first started and I did, you know, little kids from life or animals from life, and it was hard to draw little kids because they wouldn't hold still. And I could see that I was getting better because by the, you know, a few years in, now I can draw things just from memory, and I could draw expressions from, and people could move and I could draw them. I could see that I was getting better, but I still wasn't as good as I could be with a camera.
Mhm.
So it was this weird contradiction where to the world, I was actually looking worse, but to me, I knew I was getting better. And so
Wow.
now I'm in a really exciting time because now
That's good.
I'm using technology, but I have all of the skills that I
Right.
acquired while pushing myself into uncomfortable places.
Yeah.
And so now I'm really excited about hopefully doing better work. Now is the time to hopefully I'll be doing better work. Whereas for the past 14 years, I know I've been doing worse work
Yeah. Man,
because
we're
of all those
probably in
compromises.
arms in that way because I'm constantly feeling uncomfortable with everything I do, and it's really fun. It's nuts. But I know that's where my joy is. I know that I'm getting better. The only reason why I'm doing it is because I know I need to learn color, so I push the color idea, or I need to learn how to let go of more edges and not get uptight about stuff. You know what I mean? So I do
I
exercises where I'm
totally,
not, yeah, but it
not to be all
requires,
spiritual. Oh, go ahead.
no, please do. Go.
Not to get all spiritual and weird on you, but this is the way I look at it. A lot of artists have this idea, and I don't disagree with this. I also share this, but not to the same degree as the other idea I'll share. But a lot of artists have this idea that they want to leave a legacy behind. They want their paintings to outlive them. And maybe someday people will talk about their work and it'll be in history books or influence future artists. And these are noble goals. And I also share them. But the goal that I have more than that is what I do here, because in my personal opinion, my personal belief is this is the only thing I take with me. The paintings stay, right? What I become, I believe, goes on after death. What I leave behind rots. And so I feel that, and that's just coming from a spiritual place. Not a lot of people share that opinion,
I love it.
but it affects a lot of the decisions I make because it's more important to me to be better than to look better. Does that make sense? It's more
Man,
important what I become than what I leave.
you know, if
So
if I could do this podcast the way I really want to, it would be all spiritual, to be honest.
really,
Yeah, no, I think about that so much more than I do about painting every day.
that's
And
awesome to hear.
yeah, no question about it, because
Yeah.
my painting is a byproduct of all of that, and the search for all of it.
Hmm.
But the
Yeah.
peace, what gives you the peace of mind, and it's not the ego. Building up the ego is fun when you're young for a little while until you realize it's the source of all problems. When you realize that, it's like, okay, I realized that
Hmm.
it drove the bus for all these years. Didn't get to drive the bus anymore in my place. So yeah, so I was going to ask you that question about your religious paintings. Obviously, you have a deeper conviction about it. Or what is it that makes you want to express these paintings? Because you could obviously paint about mythological anything, right? But you chose this
Yeah.
theme.
Well, some historians argue that Christian artists of the past were only doing it for the commissioner, for the patron. I don't know. I don't see how that's even possible. I
Mm.
suppose it can be, but if people claim that Rembrandt didn't believe what he painted or Caravaggio didn't, Caravaggio, he very well could have and just been a troubled person. Because we're all screwed up. We're just trying to do our best. But
That's
or
good.
Michelangelo, right? And for me, it's definitely I'm painting this because I'm just more grounded when I paint stuff like this.
Mm.
And I find that for me personally, because I do have a big ego and I
You
try and keep it under control, you know, I really do, but I care what people think more than I should, and I want to be. I'm competitive more than I should be, and I mean, I'm embarrassed of it, but I
That's part of the
but
fun.
I find that it's a part of humanity, really, but not to make an excuse for myself. But I find that if I'm not painting something that gets me out of that ego that's bigger than myself, then I
Mm,
can spiral. I'll spiral into this weird, ugly place where it's all about me, 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 me. And it's not like I'm going out and committing crimes or anything, but I'm just not as emotionally healthy when I'm thinking about me, me, me all the time. So when I'm
mhm.
painting things that I believe are bigger than me, it helps me personally keep grounded. You know,
That's
I don't think other
beautiful.
people need it, so I'm not suggesting this is a solution for everybody. I think frankly, it's a solution for weak people. I'm not suggesting that weak people are religious. I'm suggesting that I don't see that at all. I think it's strong.
Yeah,
To have faith
yeah.
is a strength. But what I'm saying is that I need this, and it's not a formula for everybody, but it's something that I need to stay grounded. So that's
I
why I
love
do it. Yeah. And I found that out by accident. I never intended to paint
it.
paintings of Christ. No, no. I thought they were so dorky, and I still struggle with that.
Mm,
I wanted to be like a hip artist,
mm,
and one day I met a woman who I was actually teaching a Sunday school lesson that day. And I met this woman that I thought would be a great character in that Sunday school lesson. It was a woman washing Christ's feet with her hair. And I thought, dang, I think someone needs to paint her in this story. But I wasn't willing to do it because I wanted to be a hip artist, and painting Jesus at the time I thought was just sort of not cool.
mm.
And so I just kept thinking about it, thinking about it. I was sitting in church at the time and just in this looking at her probably in a creepy way. Fortunately, she never caught me, but just like I elbowed my wife and said, someone should paint her in this. She's just perfect for it. And then eventually I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give it a try reluctantly. And then I was so moved by the experience and so overcome by the experience. Dude, it was like, I don't have a choice. I got to keep doing this. And I
Mm.
kind of was sick about it. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I want to be respected by my peers. And I want to be this. I was young, in my 20s,
Yeah.
and I want to be somebody in the art world. And I knew how people perceive Christianity. And I'm just like, but I was so moved by the whole experience that I felt like I didn't have a choice at that point. So for a lot of years, I sort of did both things and was just always a conflicted artist, like trying to chase two careers. And then one day my dealer said to me, Jeff, you've made two careers. You've had success in both careers and you can live off of either one of them. And he was right. I could. Things were going so well. And then I got sick and really scary sick. It was before Obamacare. And I thought I might not live through it. And
Really?
yeah, and I won't get into too much detail, but it went on for 5 years, and I and I realized at that point that I don't have time to do two careers. Like if I want to be great at one, like really great, then I got to focus on one, and I had to throw the other one out. And that's
Mm.
when I more or less let all that pop art, sort of Wayne Thiebaud stuff go,
Mhm.
and started focusing more on this dream. And it was about the same time that I decided I'm going to do the Life of Christ. And I took a 2.5 year sabbatical. I started studying Rembrandt religiously, pardon the pun, and trying to figure out how to paint more classically. Because with the
Mm.
Wayne Thiebaud style stuff, Alla Prima seemed to serve that better, sort of
Mm.
look cleaner, more quick and fresh. Whereas now I'm after something more rich and deep and with more history in the
Yeah.
paint. And so I completely shifted over 2.5 years. I stopped selling paintings. I lived on savings,
Right.
all while being sick and thinking I'm going to die
Whoa.
and trying to become like Rembrandt. And, and then, yeah, that's the short version. There's a really long version, and then I just stuck with it. There were a few times I swayed and I started to see my, my skills getting much better. And then I started seeing success again and my ego started getting to me and I got sicker and then I'd get back focused and then I'd start to feel better. And eventually I realized that as long as I'm doing this, I'm healthy. So I kept just focusing on doing this. So it's, that's what I do. I'm kind of stuck with it.
I'm kind of speechless to listen to you talk about this. This is beautiful. So
I've never shared this on a podcast before, so sorry if it's a little too religious for you. I don't talk religion on my podcast, so
no.
you're stuck with it, man.
No, I love it. I love it. You know, there are those who are not. I'm not particularly religious, but I love the teachings of Christ. In fact, I
Yeah.
have a series of paintings I want to do with that. And I did this in my early 20s. I did one night, I did these really bold ink washes of like
Yeah.
the Sermon on the Mount and all these ideas. And I tossed them away, and I felt like I'm not ready to paint these yet because I'm not good enough yet. But they're in the file drawer. I want to paint them one day, and
Oh man, I would love to see that.
it'll be a
I would
crazy.
kill to see that.
Well, one day.
Man, well, do it after I get my project done so that I have a chance of looking impressive. So just wait another 20 years. We'll just say when Liam graduates from high school, you can do it. How about that? Let's just agree on that right now.
That's true. What you do with all this? Hey, we have a few questions. I want to pop them up.
Okay.
And see who's got studio chat. Can I read a few of these to you, Jeff? Can
Sure,
you see
yeah.
them?
I can't see him.
Scott Jones can see has a question. I've been visiting studios in
Scott Jones.
Yeah.
Scott Jones, just call me if you got a question. That guy's the best. Okay.
He just making a nice commentary about it. Millie, hello from Arizona. You mix colors, Jeff. You are a genius. I agree. Thank you for your sharing your process. Cove Silas. Hi, Quang and Jeff. This interview has been amazing. Can either of you talk about how to see things in shapes? How do you deconstruct a complex subject down? I've been trying to ask you about that. I would assume a lot just takes time.
I think of it, I have this in my curriculum. I have this pretty long section in a couple videos on picture plane. And I literally visualize a piece of glass between me and the subject, perpendicular to my line of sight. And I just imagine if I could trace with a marker the shapes on that sheet of glass. And it makes it so much easier for me to visualize complex things like foreshortening on a two-dimensional surface if I can visualize that picture plane. And just to say picture plane doesn't work as well for me. I literally visualize glass. And there have been times where I'll reach out and imagine myself drawing on that picture plane to see that shape. And it really helps me to see it.
So, okay, I'm trying to picture. So you have your subject in front of you, and you just imagine a plane of glass right in front of them?
Right in front of you.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it helps me. So let's say I have a hand coming toward you like this, right?
Yeah.
I don't look at it like a hand. I imagine glass in between, and I just imagine tracing around it. It's two-dimensional. It's two-dimensional. Yeah. It's not three-dimensional. It's two-dimensional. And I'm imagining it on the glass. And if you think of it like, okay, now I'm restricted. I can't trace back or forward, because that's what your mind does, right? Your mind wants to reach back to the elbow, and then it draws it that way by drawing it down further on the page. When it's not down further on the page, it's way back in space. But if you can visualize it on that sheet of glass, it's just like a half an inch below the wrist. And you stop thinking about it as an elbow, and it's just a shape on a sheet of glass. Just trace around it. Obviously not literally doing that. I'm visualizing it.
Yeah. There's a great way to see it, though. It makes so much sense.
Works for me.
Yeah. So that's drawing. So when I think about this might help for this person who's asking about the shape. How I think about shapes, Jeff, I think the whole secret to painting is about shapes. And value and color go to describe shape. So it's line, right? You can describe a shape with a line, or you can describe a shape with a value, or once you see that, then you can describe a shape with a color. In fact, the color is not complete until you see the shape of it, and then you can place the color to it. So the way I look at shape, when he's talking about deconstructing shape, let's say I'm looking at your photograph right now, staring at me, right? I can say, let's ignore all the colors and only look at the widest looking shapes in your photograph. So that,
Mhm.
and I see that all as one shape on the composition. And you say, okay, now look at all the darkest shapes, whether it's black or the darkest looking shapes next to that. So I'm seeing each value relationship as a particular shape and how they
That's
sit.
exactly what I do. Yeah.
And so I see, and so next pick the red. Look at the 3 reds that I'm seeing. 4. So there's a little bucket behind you, and there's a little fire bucket to your left of your shoulder,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and a book in the background. So you can see those placements. And those are 3 shapes that if I anchor those right, everything else should fit around that. You know what I mean? So
Mhm. Mhm.
that's how I deconstruct shapes in a painting.
Yeah,
If I
and I do that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so that helps. But what you're doing with the glass really helps to see everything on a one-dimensional plane, which is really helpful to get proportions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that just helps with the precision of the shape. But I do the same with just separating the light and dark patterns
yeah,
and breaking things down into patterns. But to get that very good, solid likeness, sometimes it can be, whether it's the likeness of a hand or a face or a car or whatever,
hmm.
then I rely on that picture plane to just not think three-dimensionally, but think two-dimensionally.
Do you
But then
draw?
I'll,
You draw out first,
no, it's all in my head, right? No, I mean, you've seen me paint, right? It's just like,
just
I
the head.
do all this, but you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it because it's all here, right? So I'm not literally outlining a shape. It's just that as I compare, I'm visualizing it. It's almost like, you ever seen like as the Matrix, where they move, where they can, where the person in the movie moves the shape across and moves it from this place in space to this place in space,
Yeah.
like these digital shapes through the air. Technology will probably have someday. That's kind of what I'm doing is I'm imagining it. So I'm seeing, like, I'm looking at your face right now and you don't have a lot of light and dark pattern. You're lit pretty evenly all over, but I would find a shape that I can help anchor, and I would visualize it over on my canvas and almost visualize it moving and superimposing it onto the canvas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would do that from a two-dimensional plane, right? So from the picture plane, from as though I was pulling it off of glass and then visualizing it onto the canvas. It's all
Oh,
here, but you don't see me doing it because I go right into color, and it's it's very like loose and kind of chaotic and fast. And so it might not look like that's what I'm doing, but it's what's happening in my head.
gotcha. So do you
So
when you
yeah.
go around to doing the painting after the wash or whatever, do you start in one area and finish it outwards, or do you work the whole painting? Because different
I
artists
work the
work.
whole painting.
You do. Interesting.
Yeah, because when you're working from life the way I've trained myself to work, you don't have the luxury of working one spot out because you don't have all the information of the whole painting. So
Mm,
you have to build it up together because you don't know what everything else is looking like.
mm,
The window painting, which is what you're describing, seems to me, I could be wrong, but it seems to me a product of the 19th century when they introduced photography, where you can finally see everything you're painting and it never moves, and you can work from one area at a time and know that if you get that area right, then you can move on to the next and get it right, and it all comes together. But when you're working from life, nothing is there except the piece you're working on, so you have no context.
mhm,
So I might only have a mannequin with a shirt on in a painting of 50 figures in a building and animals and everything else. And so all I've got is a shirt in my studio. So how could I possibly just work on the shirt without context? So you have to work the whole thing at once. And I've just brought that over into my way of working now because that's the way I train myself to work.
interesting.
Even though now I am working from photography, I still work the whole thing at once. And the other reason of working the whole thing at once is because then I can build layers.
Yeah,
I don't want to finish everything. I want to leave things unfinished so that I can add to it and build layers and build up the painting together.
yeah,
Uh, that's the other reason.
interesting. I found that that's more and more I'm working that way as well, working the whole big picture, and I have to look
Yeah.
at the whole composition, and then because I know I can zoom into a spot anytime I like. When I was younger, I would, even from life, I would work whether there's still life or a figure, I would rough it in and then zoom in on a spot and just work it out. And I find that
Right.
that's the safest way to be correct all along the way. And I think Richard Schmidt works pretty much that way too, from watching him
Yeah.
do things, right?
Yeah. And it works if the subject is in front of you. Like I said, if it's in front of you, great.
Yeah.
But if it's not, good luck. Right. I don't see how it's possible. I don't see how it's possible. So with multi-figure painting, I don't know.
Yeah, at least for the really big
Yeah.
ones. So
Yeah.
painting, does painting seem to get easier for you as you go? Is it getting, do you feel
Well,
like
obviously it's getting easier, but it's never easy. I always tell people, like, as you probably know, I mean, I have all these other hobbies and from metalwork, leatherwork, electronics. I like to engineer things. I like, I've had my hands in a lot of different things. And I was telling somebody the other day, and I think this is true. Like I just remodeled my bathroom and I built all the furniture in it and I built all the cabinets and I did everything from scratch, even down to the switch plates were custom made out of metal. And,
wow.
and what I found is that even though I've spent in hours, 100 times more hours painting than all the other things I've done, I think that my leatherwork, woodwork, metalwork, other skills that I have are more closely aligned with a professional, with those who do it well, than my painting is with those who do it well. In other words, I'm looking at Rembrandt and I feel like it's so far ahead and so hard to get to with painting, even though I've spent 100 times the amount of time. But when I picked up fiberglass, I felt like I could do as well as most fiberglass guys within, 40 or 50 hours of practice. It's like,
wow.
It's just so freaking hard painting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not saying I can do as good of a job as those guys. I can't, but I'm saying I'm closer to it than I'll ever be to Rembrandt in painting, even though I spend all my time painting, most of my time painting. Does that make sense? And I'm just trying to make the point that it's like painting is so freaking hard for me.
Yeah.
So yes, it gets easier, but it's amazing to me just how hard it is to be a good painter.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that's a great answer. I tells me that because I picked up woodworking a little bit when I was in Pennsylvania because we have beautiful hardwood that people just cut up and burn. I'm like, that's walnut.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
So I started messing around with it a little bit, and I had to like start collecting all this tool, and I love doing it, but I have very little time to do it because
I know. Watch how fast you get good at it, though.
Well,
compared to how fast you got good at painting, you'll be shocked.
Yeah, no, and it's really fun because it's great instant gratification. You build something, it's like, whoa, that thing's cool. But no,
I know.
It's a whole different thing.
Yeah, and for anyone listening that does other things, I'm not knocking those other professions.
Oh.
All I'm saying is, having tried all these things, for me personally, just for me personally, I can't speak for other people, but for me personally, painting is still the hardest. Yeah, it's just, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because of who I am, or maybe painting's harder. I don't know. But for me personally, painting is still the hardest thing that I do.
I think the level of frustration that I have with painting is still the same as when I was younger. In fact, maybe more now because I know more now.
It's more for me. Yeah, I know. You know how much you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's more difficult.
Yeah, I did a portrait of my wife when I was in college. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's embarrassing. And I remember saying this to her. It's in my basement right now where it belongs. But I remember saying it was just a drawing, and it was pretty good for someone who was relatively new to art training, but it's nothing like what I'm able to do now. And I haven't reached anywhere close to where I want to be. Yeah. But at this point, I thought I'd arrived. I think I even said that to my wife, Jen. I am the bee's knees, man. Are you looking at this drawing, Jen? Like, do you realize who you're married to? What kind of genius could draw this? Do you realize? I mean, I don't know if I said exactly that, but I feel like that's how I felt. And I love it. And now I look back and I'm like, what? How could you possibly be so ignorant? And And now, as I'm
That's
older, now that I'm older, now I can't, now all I can do is look at my work and be like, am I ever going to get good at this? And I don't know what happens with age. I don't know. It's weird.
I'll say something about what you just said there. I remember doing that with a portrait of a dog I did in high school, and I felt so good about it. And the level of joy I had back then is not less than what I have now when I do a really good painting. You know what I mean? That means that
Yeah.
all on the way, you grab onto these little moments of joy. And during our interview with Rose and Joe, that you had asked something about what is art, and I said, "What does that happen to somebody who's just beginning to paint?" A grandma who's starting to paint, whatever. But I said, "Yeah, it's joy. It's that level of joy that you get out of doing it. Whether how doesn't matter how good you are, but you do it for the first time, and the amount of joy that you that gets you to do the next one, and that gets you to the next one, and along the way you realize how sucky you were back then, but your joy doesn't change. You know what I mean? So I think I
Yeah.
can hold
Yeah.
on,
But
actually.
don't you find, maybe you don't, maybe it's just me. Maybe I need to see a shrink, or maybe you can be my shrink right now. What don't, but don't you feel like it was easier to find joy when you were more ignorant and more, when you were like at that point when you first started realizing you had talent and it was like this new magical power you had, and then you started realizing, oh wait, it's going to be a lot more work to get from this point where I realized I had talent to just a little bit more. It's like for me in my 20s, it was just this moment, or maybe not, a series of moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, I see all this potential. This is so exciting. I have this gift, right? And then I realized how hard it's going to be to make that gift more than it was at that moment, like to really get it, to really refine that gift. Do you know what I'm saying? So it
Yeah.
was so exciting in the beginning. And I just remember feeling like, man, this is crazy. I can do this thing. And now I've been able to do that thing, at least at the level I was in my 20s for 30 years, right? Or almost 30 years. But the following 25 years has been a grueling, slow path upward, fortunately upward. Whereas that first year, realizing you had something special was just this bam. It was like amazing high. And so I don't know. I don't know if you experienced that, but that's kind of what I'm saying. Where now with age, it's like it's harder for me to feel that personal pride that I used to have because I realize how much more I have to grow. Where at the time I was just like, "Go, I have a superpower,"
Well, but
and it doesn't feel like a superpower anymore.
two things I have to say about that. One is that it pops into my head as you were talking about that. I think um, joy is connected to innocence. That pops into my head where you're talking about it.
Yeah, you're probably right.
There's a certain level of innocence about diving into something like a little child, and you get the joy that comes from, oh, look what just happened. But the other thing is, you recognize how good you are. You recognize what you're capable of. Otherwise, you wouldn't be teaching and passing on these ideas. Obviously, you're really, really, really good. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you recognize how hard it is and how much further you could, I do a painting. I'm thinking, I've done this 30 years now, a landscape, I've done this, or a figure, and it's still difficult. Like, it's not looking at all like what I
That
thought it
makes
should.
me I hate to find joy in your misery, but that makes me really happy. I mean, the fact that it's difficult for you makes me feel I'm gonna sleep better
Oh,
tonight.
gosh, it's difficult all the time. But that what makes it so much, that's what makes it so joyful when you make a little breakthrough. It doesn't have to be big, just a little breakthrough,
Yeah. Yeah.
something happened there. So,
Yeah. I still have that joy. Don't get me wrong. I still have it.
sure you do. I'm sure you do.
It's just little bite-sized pieces of joy.
But I love hearing about your frustration and how hard it feels to you, because that makes me feel good about it too.
Yeah, good. We can both enjoy each other's misery.
Gosh, we're getting closer to now 2 hours. I want to ask you a little bit more about your interviews. Has it been as you thought it would go, or have you learned things about artists that you didn't know about?
Nothing about it has gone the way I thought it would go.
Really?
Well, partly because I didn't have any idea how it would go.
Uh,
So it's kind of hard to say it went the way I thought when I had no thoughts. I mean, it was, I had the idea to have a podcast. It was actually a friend of mine. I toyed around with it because I've got all this equipment. I have this great setup for teaching online. And so I thought, oh, it'd be fun to do a podcast. No, I would suck at it. So I immediately dismissed it. I'm like, I'm not an interviewer. Like, there's no way I'm going to do it. So, I mean, I had a fleeting thought once or twice, never took it seriously. And then a friend of mine, I shouldn't say this, but he said it. I'm not saying it. This friend of mine who we used to go do visits in my neighborhood for my church that I belong to. And he called me up one day and just to say hi, because he moved to Texas and he keeps in touch. He called me up one day. He says, Jeff, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? I'm like, that's crossed my mind, but I'm not seriously. He goes, because I remember when we used to do visits, you always reminded me of Joe Rogan. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, because you always were so curious and asked all these questions, and I would sit there and not know what to ask them. And I was like, well, yeah, I am a curious person. He's like, you should consider a podcast. You'd be good at it. And I'm like, are you serious?
yes,
And so it was actually a friend of mine that's not even an artist that made me think, I guess I just needed someone to say that I could do it, because I never thought of myself as an interviewer. And I'm not Joe Rogan, but that's what he said. And it was flattering because obviously Joe Rogan's very successful. But so literally within weeks, I was settled on it. I'm going to try it. He thinks I can do it. And I'm going to try it. And then I rounded up a few interviews. As you know, Adrian was one of my first.
yeah.
I can't remember. Were you one of my first? I can't remember.
It was 2 weeks after
You
that.
were early.
Yeah.
You were early, but you weren't one of the first, because I rolled out 5 in a row, like the first day. And Adrian, I think, was one of those. And what I didn't expect to happen was to love it so much. That's one thing I didn't expect. It was like, I think I'd be good at this. I'll try it. Man, I love it. Because I feel like I have 100 new friends, I mean, they probably don't feel the same way, but, but I feel like I've at least met 100 amazing people. And how many artists get to meet all of their idols, right?
And you've interviewed
And so
good ones. You really have interviewed
some really, really amazing ones. I mean, I think all 100 of them, 104 now, have been amazing.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's amazed me is that I was kind of a little nervous in the beginning that I would run out. Like I would quickly run out of idols. And it surprised me how many I have. Like how many artists that I want to get in their heads and I want to grab their superpowers. They never stop coming. I have this list that's like 300 people. And I sometimes don't even tap the list because I keep finding new people.
Wow.
And so a lot of people have asked me this and they're like, are you ever going to run out? I'm like, no, because every 5 years, five years worth of young artists grow into the field. And now I've got a whole new lot of artists to choose from. And I haven't even finished the ones I'm working on. So it's just, and not to mention, I've already interviewed several people twice, like yourself. And so I'm already getting excited to talk to people for a second time. And that's amazed me. I thought I'd run out of interest or content really quick. And 2 years in, I'm not even scratching the surface. That's what's blowing my mind.
Does it feel repetitious at all, or does it feel brand new every time?
Yeah, to me, it feels brand new. I worry that my audience is going to feel like it's repetitious, but you know what? I never did it. To be honest, I never did it for the audience anyway. I just thought, hey, if I can do this, if my friend thinks I can do this, then I have access to all these artists by having a podcast. So hopefully I'll get listeners, but it's not my number one priority. So yes, I worry that like this interview format can get old, but
I think it's one. Can I just?
But I don't know. We'll
say
see.
that I think you're providing a really beautiful and valuable service. You're doing this for free. We can get to listen for free every week. And I've learned a lot from just watching them. Like, what? They think like that?
Oh, thanks.
Some of the technical.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's really cool. I mean, I wish if we could go on for another 2 hours, I would get deep into philosophy about life. Like I would ask you, what is the meaning of life?
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that.
You know what I mean? That's where I want to go
Yeah.
with this. But you know, so one of the things I want to do with the MFA, I'm not doing this every week. I took off a year for after Liam was around, but I have friends who are musicians. I have friends who are paleontologists, head of museums that I want to ask them questions about what they do with
Dude, that's what I want to do.
well, maybe we could both.
But I want to start a new I have to start a new channel though, because my initial goal was to do all forms of art because I have so many hobbies. I want to get like
Yeah, yes,
awesome furniture makers and awesome welders and awesome everything.
well,
But I know that you've got to stick with your niche. So someday I may just start multiple channels, but I don't know. I don't have a lot of time.
we can do H and
So,
A.
but hey,
Ho and
yeah,
Hein
maybe
do this together.
I'll just be furniture makers undraped, or I don't know. We'll see.
Heck.
Yeah, but we think alike. I want the same thing because I'm not just interested in art. I want to pick everyone's brain.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, life is
Yeah.
it's so interesting. But thank you so much for making the time. I mean, I had a whole list of questions for you, and honestly, I didn't touch any of them.
You didn't ask. That's why I never write them down,
no,
because you don't have to. Yeah.
I usually don't. I think spontaneous is so much better anyway. But
Yeah.
your work is really amazing. I can study deeper and learn about color looking at your work. But your way of doing these
That's nice of you to say.
that's just insane what you're doing. But these podcasts
Yeah.
are really inspiring. I love that you dive into the minds of some of my favorite artists that are working out there, young and old, right?
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
so many. So I don't know if I don't think we
Thanks,
have
man.
questions. If people have questions, a couple minutes, but I'm so grateful to hear your testimony, knowledge, sensitivity. That's great. Just not from somebody from New Zealand, the successful stories. This is great. Okay. Listening to many podcasts, there are many successful stories of talented, hardworking artists that either learn by taking workshops or attending ateliers. What would be your advice? There you go. That's a good one.
A mentor. I don't know. I can't honestly say that there's a right way to learn from a mentor.
Yeah.
But if I could do it over again, I would have a mentor. And I had several part-time mentors here and there, people kind of slipping in and out of my life in various ways. But I didn't have one mentor that I could just go to and help me solve many of the complex problems in this painting journey. It's crazy. There's so many things I wish I knew 10 years before I knew them.
Yeah.
That would have been changed my painting with just a simple sentence. Like Joe Paquette, what he said.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been painting 22 years and he just said it. And it changed my painting so much, at least my landscape painting.
Yeah.
So a mentor is critical. You can learn on your own. Most people with talent can learn on their own, but it's going to take infinitely more time. So whether it's workshops, or I think finding one mentor that you really trust, that you know has your best interest in mind, and sticking with them, but also one that's not going to try and conform you to be them, but one that just wants you to be the best version of you as an artist.
Yeah.
That's what I would be after.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice.
Well, Millie, for me, I would say if you're lucky enough to find a mentor, it's invaluable. But that's why I started MFA dot studio, because I wanted to build it like a YouTube for artists in a sense. So I have about 30 videos on there, and when I teach what I understand, and I don't teach a way of painting. So if I teach a landscape painting, I talk about, or a figure, or a glazing, or Rembrandt, teaching about Rembrandt, how he painted. Then I dive into how he did it. So that once you have an understanding of how to do it, you can find your own way to do it. You know what I mean? So I don't teach a technique, I teach how to. So on the MFA platform, we have a lot of other artists. So I would love to have a few of your videos on there, Jeff, if you ever want to just, because
sure, yeah,
community,
cross-pollinate.
And so you go on there and you can choose to pick what you want. And I want to kind of create a curriculum the way that you do, and Jeff, where I can set aside certain videos from different artists that talk about one line of thinking, whether it's line shadow
Yeah.
or abstract expressionism, whatever it may be. The other thing I would say, Millie, is look at what Jeff is offering online, because you're doing an online course systematically as well, right? Where you
Right.
still,
And mine is a mentorship where they actually speak to me every Friday.
wow. And you
Yeah.
mean,
So I speak to everyone in my mentorship every Friday. Yeah.
yeah, as a group or individual?
Well, there's four classes of 15. So and the beauty of it, this was kind of an experiment, but it's interesting. It's actually better as a group. A lot of people are doing, in my opinion, a lot of people are doing just one-on-one stuff, and I can understand the appeal to that.
Mm-hmm.
But what the feedback I've gotten is that they love the group for several reasons. One, we've created a family. These people love each other. It's amazing. I can tell that they communicate outside of class. We've created this whole kind of, I don't know, this online community. But that's trivial compared to the other benefits. The other benefit is when I'm critiquing a more advanced person, the beginners understand the context of what they're learning in the beginning stuff.
Absolutely.
So they're like, that's why I'm learning this, because of what you're telling this person. So now I get this assignment that seems so like trivial. Now I get how it's applied to the future assignments and the more complex concepts. And then on the flip side, the advanced students are constantly telling me, man, even when you're critiquing a brand new student at the most beginning stuff, I'm constantly reminded that I'm forgetting to do those things.
Yeah.
And so the advanced students are remembering and being reminded of beginning critiques, and the beginners are being given insight as to where they're headed and given context as to what they're doing. So I love the group thing.
I don't know what you charge for that, but I would be signing up for that so fast if I was learning to paint right now.
It's $350 a month. $350.
That's so good. That's so much better than
I think so.
Holy smokes, dude. I'm sending Liam to you.
Oh my gosh.
I love it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair.
Yeah, but we have such great resources out there right now that even if you're remote somewhere, you can learn all that. I want to turn MFA not just a subscription base, but like a platform that we can link what you do to there. If you want to have individual videos for sale, I'm going to have all my videos available. If people don't want to join, I can just pick and choose whatever lesson they want to as well, so they're not locked up into subscription. But our subscription is so darn cheap anyway, it's ridiculous. So,
dude, if you can get videos of you teaching for cheap, that's worth its weight in gold, man.
Yeah, it really is cheap. But I remember how meaningful it was. Like you say, it could be just one line that could change. And I've taught workshop where I could see what this person's doing for 15 years, and I could step in and say, this is not what you're seeing. And it's just one line. They're a different painter. That happens. And it happened to me when I
know. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. And we can share that kind of thing now. It's just wonderful. So,
yeah.
Well, Jared Brady, you know Jared Brady?
I do. Yeah. Young artist.
He is an amazing young artist.
Great painter. He's one of those. There's like a whole group of little prodigies, man. I don't mean to say little, but little as in young prodigies.
Yeah.
You're not little. Yeah. There's a whole group of them that just paint like incredible for being so young. It's mind blowing.
He's mind blowing. He came to me just still in high school, and I'm like, and he's very shy and uncomfortable, and now he just is a giant slayer. He's amazing. So
he's on my list too. I'm gonna get him eventually. Yeah, you should
get all these.
If he's listening, watch out, Jared.
Yeah, Adrian Stein, who's that? Such a wonderful wealth of knowledge, Jeff.
She's amazing. She has lousy taste in men, but she's amazing. That's what I've heard. I don't know anything about it really, but some people say that.
Adrian had a question. She said that such a wonderful wealth of knowledge, Jeff. I'm curious about specifically how being a cancer survivor affected your personal life and work.
It's all those cliches are totally spot on. I mean, when I was first starting out, I literally didn't know how much longer I would live. It really makes you feel like life is short. And
Wow.
mine is more than cancer. I'm missing most of my intestines, and my doctors told me they didn't know how long I would be able to live on 4 feet of intestines.
Wow.
So even if my cancer never came back, I still wasn't sure what my future was like. So I worked like a dog. I mean, I was just like, I got no time to screw around. If I'm going to make something of myself, I got to bust my butt. And it's kind of sad because I do work a lot, but I'm not as productive as I was then. I probably worked 80 hours a week. But man, when I was in my 20s, I just had this sense of urgency
Mm.
that was insane. And it was due a lot to my illness, but also I think just to the fear that many of us have that people plant in our minds as you're trying to become an artist over and over and over again. You can't make it. You can't make it. You can't make it. So between that and feeling like time was fleeting, I was just like determined to not fail,
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. Well, let me, unless I'm missing anything else that you want to add that I might not be asking you. I think,
No, I think we covered everything. I could give you a brief tour of the studio.
yeah, I want to see that.
Have you seen my studio, Quang?
No,
It's nothing. It's not like a normal studio. Okay. So I'm not sure I can hear you, Quang. Can I hear you?
lots of equipment. Keep talking. We can hear you.
All right, let me show you around here. Recording.
No, I can see it. Keep
Okay,
going.
we're recording now.
Yep.
So that is my painting cart right there. It's sort of like a Mod Podge of things attached to a mechanic's cart. All these little weird things. And then this is an easel that's all covered up right now. It's got cameras and whatnot all over it for teaching online. Etching press, which I wish I used more often. And then back here is the area where I build things.
It looks like a mechanic shop so far.
I know, dude. I got so many tools. I'm a tool addict, junkie. It's not like regular studios. I look at studios like of Michael Shane Neal and think, man, if I wish I were a classy artist. My studio looks like a shop. But that's just who I am, So this is my actual shop. And I have woodworking and metalworking tools in here. And these bars right here, I'm building a whole new lighting system on my ceiling tomorrow. That's what these bars are for. So they're just in the way right now.
The heck?
My model stand is right there. This is something I built. It goes up to 7 feet. It's hydraulic.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to go over all the tools, but I'll just show you. That's a forge and heat treating ovens and
a forge,
3D printer, and forge, powder coating oven, leather working table. And this is my fancy easel. I have 2 of them. One of them is 13 feet long. The way it works is this thing just goes up and down like that, and the canvas just goes right over the top. So I can work on the bottom or the top of the painting, and it's 10 feet tall and 13 feet wide.
Wow.
And then this one, same deal. The painting can go, you literally just, let me see, pull a cord and the painting just goes up.
I have a feeling.
And then
Did you build all this?
I did, yeah. I built it, yeah.
You are sick.
And it's just on rollers. There's a roller on the bottom and a roller on the top, and it just rolls all the way around, just like that. And then the classroom is out here. I'll show you a quick tour. Lockers for the students.
What?
I've only got one student here right now. Hey Sam, say hi to the camera. And then I don't know where they're. It's 6 o'clock. Everyone's gone home.
Hey Jeff, can I say so far I haven't seen any spot where you stand to paint.
That's right there, right in front of that easel.
Oh, okay. There's a chair there.
Yeah. So this is my cart, and then I stand right there.
I see.
Yeah, my chair is just pulled out and in the way. Yeah.
Wow.
So this whole, I'll back up so you can see. So this is the painting area. So I can back up and that's my canvas. You can't see it now because it's all up and over the top. But
Wonderful.
and
Man.
then this is the last thing, just a little kitchen in here where I eat lunch and whatever. And then upstairs, this is the nice part.
Is this in your house?
This is my man cave. No, it's just this building I own downtown, Salt Lake.
Oh, cool.
So this is my man cave.
Nice.
This is my hangout, workout equipment, my couches, and then this little sitting area over here.
What?
Yeah, it's a loft, so I can look over the loft at my canvas.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And then I mentioned that I just did my bathroom.
Yeah.
This is the bathroom that I just did.
You did all this yourself.
So yeah.
Of course you did. Did you do
I
this?
did that. Just finished that. My house?
Yeah.
My house looks great. Yeah, but I've got a lot of work to do on the house. I've got limited time. But yeah, I've done a lot to my house too.
I didn't know you were so
Anyway, that's
handy.
it.
I didn't know you were so handy. This is amazing.
Well, I've always worked with my hands since I was young.
Wow. I'm envious.
Yeah.
I'm sending.
All right, so that's it. Now I'm gonna turn off the phone and get back on the regular screen then.
That's great. Well, I do have one more question for you, and that is what you ask every artist that you invite onto your podcast, as to what would be the advice that you would have to somebody who wants to enter this crazy field as a career, or there's two ways to do it, isn't there? As a way to enjoy it, or do you want to enter it as a career? And what would you give?
I don't know, the way to enjoy it. I don't have a lot of advice for that. Just enjoy it. If you like it, just do it, right? But for the career, I think I would say two things that have been really important to me in my career. Two really important things. One is you got to have a strong work ethic.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to put in the work. This stuff the sales aren't going to come to you. You've got to paint. And then from the time you train till you start your business as an artist, and it is a business. I mean, you've got to sell paintings to support your hobby, right? So, and then the other thing is financial. And I think it's really important for me personally, and I really recommend this to anybody. If you start making money painting and it puts you a little bit ahead, let's say you have a job and then you start selling paintings on the side, I highly recommend you don't spend a dime of that. And this is what I did. I had a handyman business. We started selling paintings. I put every dime of those paintings in the bank. And then eventually I had enough painting sales to live on for a year. And my goal has been for that time forward to have at least 2 years of income in the bank so that I never have to paint for money. I can always be pure with my paintings and paint what I want to paint. And I don't have to live in constant fear. Because the death of an artist is to be like, oh my gosh, I have to paint something that'll sell. Because you're never going to guess right. You know, if you try and paint to sell, you'll probably be wrong. And it's just not healthy to have that attitude anyway. It's just too stressful to be creative. You need to be able to have some peace in your life to really be creative and to do your best work. So the only way to do that is to have a cushion. And my personal comfort zone is 2 years income in the bank. What is my budget for 2 years to live on? Make sure there's that in the bank in cash all the time. And have that as a cushion so I can always live free and not scared all the time.
I think that's a wonderful, wonderful advice. And in fact, it's one that I have lived by since I was in my first day as an artist. That's all I did.
Yeah, good. I love hearing that.
That was my instinct. It was like, I just gotta save every dime I make. And that freedom to have it.
I think I heard you say that once.
Yeah?
Yeah, you can't live in fear. I know a guy who sold a painting and he started doing really well and he went out and bought a Mercedes and he spent all of his year's income paintings on a Mercedes because he had this extra income all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Within a year, he was no longer painting. He couldn't afford to paint anymore.
Yeah.
But he had his Mercedes, but he had to go quit, and he had to quit painting. Because he didn't give himself the cushion. He
Yeah.
didn't, and he got scared, and he had to let it go because he couldn't live with that kind of risk.
Yeah. But
So it's real important.
the other part of the equation that was important for me anyway was my needs were
Yeah.
simple. I mean, I never lived above my means. You know what I mean? Just so I can be focused on painting.
Yeah, exactly.
But if the car, it didn't matter to me what car I had back for the longest time. I'm just recently enjoying buying car, but back when, if I need to get from that point to that point, as long as it turns on and runs, I'm good. You know, so that's how I was for forever. But somebody asked.
Yeah, same.
Somebody asked you, Jeff, how do you keep the sawdust off your wet paint? I'm a woodworker too.
Oh, that's a really good question. I spent a lot of time and a small fortune on a really, really good dust collection in my shop.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't fix it, but it does a really good job of minimizing it. And it's a solid 30 feet from my shop door to my paintings. So the dust collection keeps it from getting all the way to my painting. But yeah, so dust collection, that's the way to go. Don't scrimp on it.
I'm super envious of your studio because Adrian will laugh, because I'm sure she's laughing now. She's watching this because I have a little shop down right below my studio, and it's just some tools from Harbor Freight and stuff like that. And I'm whacking at wood and trying to mix stuff. I don't know what I'm doing at all, but I'm having the time of my life.
It's all on YouTube, man. You could be anything nowadays. Everything's on YouTube.
But I need equipment and a space like what you do.
No, I know.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Somebody else, does this man ever sleep? I really want to know. How about you?
But I don't want, why would you sleep when you're doing what you love? You know, when I had kids that were young, I had to go home for dinner and I had to be home and be present. Now it's just, I mean, my wife is very independent. We do spend time together, but fortunately she's tolerant. But when you're doing what you want to be doing, it's, even though it is working, it's also not working.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's hard work, but if I wasn't getting paid, I'd still be doing it. So is it work? I mean,
yeah.
So yes, I sleep, but I basically, I get up in the morning, I leave the house immediately, head to the studio. I come home about 8 o'clock at night, and then I get on the computer and I do computer work until I go to sleep at 11.
Wow.
And then I wake up again at 7:38 and start over 7 days a week.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But my wife watches TV next to me, and while I'm working on the computer, she's watching TV, and we're spending time together. But I'm still working. My fingers are still going. And I'm still editing videos or
You're a maniac.
something.
I love it.
Yeah, man, it's a disease.
Sleep too, I tell you. And Adrian will tell you, I hate to go to sleep. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I'm not ready to go to sleep yet. You know,
there's too much to do, man. Life is too short.
Way too short.
A whole third of your life is spent on a pillow. It's crazy.
So listen, has been so much fun. It's even more than I expected. Have this.
Thanks, man.
You, Jeff. Thank you so much. And well, look, hey, we're supposed.
My pleasure. And I'm going to get you back. We're going to get you back, right? You're committed, right?
I think that
we're going to do that.
Yeah, the second part.
You and Rose and Joe again. Do number 2.
That's right.
So stay tuned for that.
I've been thinking about your question when you asked me what is the meaning of art, and I want to explain myself a little better than that.
Okay. Well, we got to get to something else though, too, though.
Oh yeah. Question. So, hey, thank you, everybody.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and this will be available if you want to use it. You know, however, it's all going to be available.
Yeah, I'll put it on my channel if you're okay with that.
Oh, absolutely. This is all about sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Sweet.
So, thanks, everybody.
Sweet.
We'll be talking to you on the next one. I don't know when I'll be doing the next one, but you have one every week, right, Jeff?
Mm-hmm.
You
every
actually
week.
Every week.
Every Monday. Yep.
You're a maniac. Okay. Well, look, it's very enjoyable. We'll look forward to it.
All right. See you, everybody.
Thank you.